Good morning, Denver. You've tuned into the Jeff and Bill Show on 710 KNUS. I'm your co-host, Jeff Hunt, along with Bill Thorpe, bringing you the freshest insights and hottest takes to kickstart your day. It's another beautiful day in Denver, Colorado, and we're gearing up for a morning of engaging discussions, critical analysis, and your calls, because this is where Denver's voice is heard loud and clear. So grab your coffee, Denver. Let's drive and dive into the issues that matter most to you right here, right now. We've got an incredible show, jam-packed. 6 a.m. joining us just in a few minutes, Dudley Brown, president of the National Association for Gun Rights. There is a major bill down at the state capitol being heard today titled, quote, prohibit certain weapons used in mass shootings, which is essentially most guns. They're seeking to ban pretty much everything except for musket loading guns down at the state capitol. And in light of that, Rocky Mountain gun owners, 8 a.m. this morning, rally to stop this ban on the west steps of the Colorado state capitol. So we're going to get all that insight, all that coverage, trying to protect your Second Amendment rights down there. Rocky Mountain gun owners joining us in just a few minutes. Then we're going to get into this story. Did you hear this? Fentanyl found on a chartered bus that fourth graders were using here in Colorado. We'll be talking with the DEA in the 7 o'clock hour. We're going to get into free speech in the internet in the 8 o'clock hour. You had two U.S. Supreme Court cases around this issue yesterday, and Don Lemon and Elon Musk going at it over free speech in the internet. So wild show to cover on that in the 8 o'clock hour. And then Keith Humphreys, professor from Standford University, will be joining us in the 9 o'clock hour. He wrote a viral article in the Atlantic, Why Oregon's Drug Decriminalization Failed. You will not want to miss a minute of today's show. Absolutely jam-packed with the news you need to know. But here's what's most important. This show, unlike any other show in Colorado, you are invited to be a part of the conversation. We want you to call in 303-696-1971, 303-696-1971. Text us on the 710 KNUS app. You are invited to be a part of this show. We want you to call in and text. Good morning, Bill.
Hey, morning. How are you?
You know, I'm finally getting over this crazy cold. I think you are still in the thick of it, man.
I am. It is nuts. And I just forgot something to load the audio this morning. So I have to do these 17 steps to get the audio into the system. I just realized, I didn't do the final steps. I don't know. Whoever designed this system is, I don't get it.
I love people that make things more complicated. We talked about this yesterday with Ben's Ford, the consultants that were hired. And these consultants came in from Texas and were like, you know how to make your museum amazing? Get rid of the live people and just put up a bunch of signs.
I've never had a system update in computers and other things that has made things easier. It's never made my user end experience less complicated or easier. It's always more complicated, always more difficult, which tells me that these updates and designs are not necessarily user interface focused. That's not it. This is back-end stuff. This is making it easier for all the technical people, because back into this system that we have now, very easy for the technical people. For the user, no, not friendly. I gotta go put some stuff.
Bill's having an existential crisis this morning with the system.
It's such a pain. It's 4 extra steps versus what the original system did, and that's dumb. Whoever was in the meeting and said, adding all these extra steps, that makes perfect sense. That's great.
Let me give you some insight on this gun bill today. This is from Dave Koppel over at Complete Colorado. By the way, go to CompleteColorado.com every morning. Just check in on the news there. Great conservative blog, kind of like the Colorado version of the Drudge Report. So here's Dave Koppel, Complete Colorado, on today's bill. HB 24-1292 prohibits firearms with certain features, such as stocks that can be adjusted to fit the user's arm length. These features are, quote, designed for warfare, refined to maximize killing large numbers of people quickly and efficiently. Supposedly, the firearms are, quote, not suitable for self-defense. I appreciate the government telling me that. And not well suited for hunting, sporting, or any purpose other than mass killing. The bill itself refutes its own malicious lie, as the prohibition does not apply to a peace officer. The bill's sponsors often make a big public show of claiming to be very, very concerned about police violence, yet their bill allows police officers to wield weapons designed for warfare, refined to maximize killing large numbers of people quickly and efficiently. So he then gets into a deep dive on the actual data and goes line by line through the bill. Here's the conclusion. HB 24-1292, this is the bill being heard today around 10 a.m., rally at 8 a.m. down at the state capitol. Its stated purpose is to prevent ease of use, making firearms use difficult for non-experts. The stated purpose is obviously unconstitutional and a disdain of lawful self-defense. Hence, the bill's safety clause for the immediate preservation of the public peace, health, and safety is incorrect. Getting rid of accurate firearms and forcing people to use less accurate arms that are more difficult for non-experts to fire accurately is the opposite of public safety. The bill falsely asserts that features which improve accuracy are not suitable for self-defense or any purpose other than mass killing. Then the bill irrationally puts those same mass killing weapons not suitable for self-defense in the hands of Colorado police officers, essentially making the argument we always do with the Second Amendment that when you take away guns from law-abiding citizens, the only people left with guns are the government and criminals. Right? That's it. Some of the bill sponsors have not been shy about public self-congratulation for the commitment to diversity and inclusion, yet HB 24-1292 is based on raw bigotry and ignorance. With reckless disregard for public safety, the bill's only real purpose is a big step towards lobbyist goals of banning all guns. All right, we're going to get into this and more. Let's check in on the news with Blake Olson. Good morning, Blake.
Good morning, Jeff. Good morning, Bill. 34 and clear in Denver. Expecting a beautiful day today with highs in the lower 60s. The 7-10 5-day forecast is coming up. Our top story, parents on alert after fentanyl was found on a bus chartered by a Pueblo school. Fourth graders at Highland Park Elementary went on a field trip to the Denver Aquarium last week. When the bus returned to its Colorado Springs location, the driver spotted blue pills on the floor. District 60 says police think the drugs were left behind before students boarded. Families were urged to talk to their kids in case any of them picked up a pill, and you're urged to talk to your kids about fentanyl every day if you can. I know I am. Colorado could be the first in the nation to cap drug costs in an effort to save people money on their prescriptions, but some lawmakers are pushing a bill to limit which drugs a special board can review, arguing companies could stop selling so-called orphan drugs in the state if there's a cost limit affecting those drugs being treated for rare diseases.
Orphan drugs are often the most expensive drugs in the state, and so it's the board's responsibility to review those thoroughly.
Priya Talang works with the Colorado Consumer Health Initiative, which advocates for patients struggling to pay for their prescriptions. She says Senate Bill 60 would essentially gut the Prescription Drug Affordability Board, which is considering setting a maximum price for medications deemed unaffordable like Enbrel. Governor Polis expected to sign a bill banning the term excited delirium. The state Senate passed it Monday, sending the legislation to his desk. The bill would keep first responders from using the term in training or reports. The suspect accused of killing two people on the campus of UC Colorado Springs will be evaluated to see if he's competent to stand trial. His attorney also asked at a hearing Monday to push back his preliminary hearing 2 months out because of a cyber attack at the public defender's office. But the suspect asked if he could make it sooner.
Can that date come faster? Like the preliminary hearing? Oh, I was saying like, can that date come up faster?
A judge granted the competency request from the defense lawyers Monday. Nicholas Jordan is accused, of course, of killing his roommate and a woman inside a dorm room last month, just hours after he asked to withdraw from the school. More chaos in Haiti.
A State Department spokesperson says people have been filling out crisis intake forms online as the U.S. tries to get people out on chartered flights. Not all of the people who filled out a form are trying to leave, but many are, and the government continues to evaluate transportation options. More than 30 Americans were evacuated Sunday to Miami. I'm Mark Mayfield.
It's 30 in Westminster, 31 in Littleton, 34 in Denver. March Madness tipping off tonight for CSU. They take on Virginia in the play-in game tonight in Dayton. The winner takes on Texas on Thursday. CU meets Boise State tomorrow in Dayton. Yes, the winner faces Florida on Friday.
Do we have to have our brackets done today? For a guy who doesn't do basketball, do I got to have my brackets done today?
You know, this whole 68 thing, playing game, I'm happy for CU and CSU, but, you know, just get your bracket done by Thursday morning. Thursday morning is the deadline. The playing game is ridiculous, but you know, it's good for the Buffs and the Rams. But here's what we do in our house. We do it Wednesday night. So you got to have at least 3 days. This starting on Tuesday is crazy, but hey, it's still college basketball and we get to enjoy it tonight. So good luck with your brackets. Nuggets at the T-Wolves this evening. Avs go for 7 straight at St. Louis tonight. And Jeff and Bill continue, and we're off and running on Tuesday. Blake Olson, News Talk 710 KNUS.
The 710 5-day forecast, sunny to partly sunny and mild. Low 60s today, 30s tonight, 60s Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So through Friday, very nice weather, very spring-like. Welcome to spring. It happens at 9:06 p.m. tonight. We're going to be fair, dry, and mild through Friday. Increasingly cloudy and cooler, though, for the weekend. Late Saturday night, Sunday into Monday. Chances of showers developing and temperatures trending colder. Meteorologist Don Day, 710 KNUS.
All right, Democrats down at the state capitol are big mad. They got a bill for you, 1292. They want to go after big scary guns they call assault weapons. Why? Well, they list it right here on line 15. I missed this. Hypermasculinity is one of the reasons that they are big mad down there. They are not a fan that guns... Line 19, page 4, the firearms industry has specifically marketed assault weapons as hypermasculine. Speaking of hypermasculine, joining us on the line is the president of the National Association for Gun Rights, Dudley Brown. Good morning, Dudley. Thanks for being on the Jeff and Bill Show.
Well, good morning, Jeff. Thanks for prompting me. I was driving down to Denver anyway, so might as well talk to
you. You're the walking definition of hypermasculine, right? That's this
wow.
This bill is directed at you.
Well, I mean, they're pretty much that's pretty much directed at anybody with the proper chromosomes. So it's you read preambles to bills and summaries of bills and I've shaken my head a lot over 3 decades of doing this, but this was one of the silliest.
So you guys are you're taking it on directly. You got a big rally at 8 a.m. Let's start there. Tell us about the rally 8 a.m. that Rocky Mountain Gun Owners is hosting west steps of the Capitol.
Yeah, since we found out that the bill was going to be heard, of course, they don't consult with us. The Democrats in the legislature aren't really known for cooperating with people who care about the Constitution. But we scheduled the rally. We invited Brandon Herrera, otherwise known as the AK guy, from Texas. He's a very big YouTuber in the gun world and a close friend of ours, and a liberty advocate himself, and also a candidate for Congress in Texas, down in San Antonio region. And so he'll be in town and at the rally, and the National Association for Gun Rights, which is our parent national group, and Rocky Mountain Gun Owners are heading it, and we'll have Taylor Rhodes, myself, and we're just going to talk about this ridiculous bill. And then, of course, House Committee is going to bring it up in front. And we understand that there are 1,000 people signed up to testify.
Fantastic. I love to hear that.
If that's the case, Jeff, that is a record.
I think so. I think so. And that means you are going to hold up that committee for hours. This thing isn't going to end till Friday.
Well, and the funny part is, Jeff, they, the committee chair can do almost anything they want. They can take only an hour of testimony on both sides, and a lot of times there is some courtesy there. But you got to understand, I think Jeff, the gun owners in this state are under assault. That is not an exaggeration. This state is circling the drain on Second Amendment issues. And it's largely because the great number of firearms owners in this state are just asleep. They just said, it'll never affect me. And this bill doesn't just apply to, big scary guns. If you look at the definitions in the legislation, it applies to many handguns. In fact, the most popular handgun being sold right now in America is the Palmetto State Armory Dagger. It's just a little Glock copy, and that gun has a threaded barrel. It's banned.
Yeah, I'm looking at the definition here of, quote, assault weapons. This is on page 6. A semi-automatic rifle that has the capacity to accept a detachable magazine.
Yeah.
That's pretty much any rifle, right? Unless you're muzzle loading it.
Yeah, I mean, it's virtually every semi-automatic rifle and shotgun that has a detachable magazine or a pistol grip or any number of other features, including threaded barrel. So they looked at California's law and said, that's weak sauce, and went a long step further. I think this would actually be the most draconian assault weapons ban, so-called assault weapons ban, in the entire country. I mean, it's bad.
I'm looking at the sponsorships of this bill. Notable humanitarians and anti-Semites, Hernandez and Epps, are leading the effort on this bill. Oh my gosh. You look at the cast of characters that have put their names behind this bill. These are just outright leftists that want only people to have guns or the government. That's essentially it with this bill, and criminals.
And I'm not even sure they want the government to have them. I'm not even sure they think it's okay for the police to have firearms. So, and we all know what that ended up meaning, is that the only people really going to be armed are the criminals.
Yeah.
People who don't care, and frankly, they're already going to commit first-degree murder and armed robbery and aggravated assault. And so, what's the big deal about a charge on a firearm? So, Jeff, we've been banging this gong for a very long time, of course, saying they want to come for all of your guns. And so whenever you hear people say, no one's coming for your guns, they're just outright liars. And they simply are. Now, combine that with some of the other legislation, like the bill to give more money to the Colorado Bureau of Investigation to hunt down people who are guilty of both the possession of high-capacity magazines, or in this case, transferring or selling a semi-automatic rifle, or even a pistol, That's a really bad combination for the entire state, and for a state that is very much centered on outdoors and hunting and the shooting sports.
Right.
It's still a vibrant community in this state, but everybody's looking at the exits. And and that's a personal decision, right? But I tell everybody this is what they want. They don't want you to stay. They want you to leave. They want you to get out of their socialist utopia. And so they run these bills because they want you to move. Because you can't have a socialist utopia if there are people with semi-automatic AR-15s minding their own business and just taking care of their families and literally causing no harm. Doesn't matter to them.
Right. It is all about control. We're talking with Dudley Brown, the president of the National Association for Gun Rights. Look, there is a rally today, 8 a.m. down at the state capitol, hosted by Rocky Mountain gun owners on the West Steps. This is in light of a bill being introduced today that is going to, quote, prohibit certain firearms used in public mass shootings. It's really an effort to go after your Second Amendment rights. It's not going to do anything to actually prevent mass shootings. In fact, I think it's going to make things worse, because when the only people that have guns are the bad guys, they are going to be unleashed upon this state. We've seen it time and time again. Who stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. That's it. And you're either going to have to call and wait for somebody, a good guy with a gun, to come and show up and help you, or you're going to be able to defend your family, your students, yourselves, or your church congregates, or your business, or anybody around you. We've got a real serious issue with this bill, and as Dudley just said, over 1,000 people have signed up. They're hearing to testify, which would break a record. Rose Puglisi sending out an email call to action to her entire list yesterday. She has a link there on where you can testify. I'll put this on my Twitter account so you can be a part of testifying as well. This is all happening this morning. Dudley, Colorado, you talk about Colorado's kind of outdoors nature, but I want to talk about Colorado's kind of social libertarian nature. Now, typically, I find myself on the wrong side of Colorado's social libertarianism. I'm being pro-life and against marijuana and against all the drug decriminalization effort that's taking place in the state. But there's two issues that tend to break my way because Colorado's a social libertarian state. One is taxes. People don't want higher taxes in this state, and they continue to defend Tabor, which is a good thing. But traditionally, in the state of Colorado, we've been able to push back on these bills that seek to ban guns. Last year, this came up, and it didn't make it out of committee, if I remember correctly. Is the state changing, or are we still holding on? Or are we able to hold on to our social libertarian nature?
Oh, I think the state's changed dramatically over 15 years. To your listeners, this is my 31st year of being a gun lobbyist, and it's changed pretty dramatically. Even many of the Republicans in the legislature are very weak-kneed compared to, let's say, 10 or 15 years ago. There's reasons for that. Open primaries is one of them. But our big concern is that they have jettisoned some of those liberty-minded views and in the legislature. Now, they're not campaigning on that. Many of the Democrats even understand that this is a difficult thing for them in an election, because gun owners tend to be, if you pardon the pun, focused and snipers in campaigns. They care about one thing first. And while I think Jeff and I, you and I agree on a great number of social issues, I kind of count myself as a only barely Republican liberty conservative, mostly because I just don't like the direction the Republican Party has taken. But the fact is, elections have consequences. Now, we beat it last year for really two reasons. One is pressure. We made it very clear that there is no walking this back. You vote for this, and it's all-out war in your districts. Every gun owner is going to know exactly who you are. And you might be able to get away with hiding a little bit, but you're not going to hide from this one. And then the big issue, Jeff, is our lawsuit. We have a lawsuit against all across the country. They're in federal courts, but we have a lawsuit against the town of Superior, which enacted an assault weapons ban in the summer of 22. And then, of course, we wrapped up the and then Louisville into that lawsuit. And we're taking that all the way to the Supreme Court if we have to. I think we will, probably. Well, right now we're in federal court, and we anticipate moving forward this summer. And we're going to take it using the provision, and we think we beat it. Now, that's the only saving grace, frankly, gun owners probably have in this state. The Democrats in this legislature are hell-bent on doing crazy things, especially on guns. This is not the only gun issue in the legislature right now. I think we count 19 threats right now of bills that are already filed or likely bills in the legislature. If you want to see what those are, it's very simple. Go to rmgo.org/billwatch, and it'll show you all the bills in the legislature with links to those bills, where they are in the process, and all the text to the bills. And we update that every day that it changes. So you want to find out what's happening in Colorado gun law, that's the only place to go. I tell people, gun owners, if you're not on our email list, if you're not following what Rocky Mountain Gun Owners is doing in the legislature, you don't care. You don't care about your Second Amendment rights. You can make the excuses you want, but if you're not involved, not a member, you're not on our email list, you don't care. I've had people come up to me, even legislators, who said, I'm so pro-gun because I own all these guns. I go, who cares how many guns you own? Are you a part of the movement? Even legislators kind of need to be a part of it.
That's right.
So get active or frankly, stack them up because they're going away.
Dudley Brown, president of the National Association for Gun Rights. No one defends the Second Amendment better than National Association for Gun Rights and Rocky Mountain Gun Owners. You guys are on the front lines. I appreciate that. Again, rally down at the state capitol today, 8 a.m. Swing by. You don't have to register. If you've never been to a rally, you just basically just walk up to it and support the Second Amendment. 8 a.m. down there. And then there's a bill being introduced probably around 10 a.m. that seeks to, quote, ban firearms used in public mass shootings. It's a cover to go after your Second Amendment rights and make sure that the only people that have guns at the end of the day are the government and bad guys, which that doesn't ever work out in the course of history for the good guys, if those are the only two other groups that have guns. So continue to support Rocky Mountain Gun Owners, support the work they're doing down there. Give us, as we wrap up here, Dudley, give us a sense of where you think this bill is going to go. You think it gets through the committee, goes to a full vote?
Yeah, unfortunately, Jeff, it's definitely going through the committee. They've got the numbers, and it's really just about timing for them. A lot of times our concern is they quick snap it and try and do things really quickly, as fast as possible to reduce the amount of heat. But this is to all your listeners, it never, ever, ever, ever hurts to put pressure on legislators. It can only do positive things. And just because you don't win doesn't mean it didn't help. Last year, we did it on this assault weapons ban, and ultimately that it made a number of Democrat legislators weak-kneed on the issue. That killed it for another year. Now this year, I don't know if we do that. If I actually knew that for a fact, I would go buy a lottery ticket. So, but But, when's the best time to kill gun control? Right stinking now. Do we have a backup plan? Frankly, our lawsuits are the backup plan.
Yeah. And that's the state of Colorado.
can.
It's a bizarre state. They know what they're passing is unconstitutional. They've done this on a whole host of issues. Look at Jack Phillips. Look at 303 Creative. Look at the Trump ballot case. Now look at this issue. They know what they're doing is unconstitutional. It doesn't matter to them. They're going to drive forward anyways. Thank God you got the U.S. Supreme Court. But guys, elections matter. Stop electing these unconstitutional, radical, secular leftists. Get good people that abide by the Constitution in, and we don't have to worry about these issues anymore. All right. Dudley, I appreciate you, brother. Thank you for going down there and doing God's work. We'll continue to track this. We'll update all of our listeners tomorrow. Again, Rocky Mountain gun owners hosting a rally 8 a.m. this morning. Go to RMGO to learn more. That's rmgo.org, rmgo.org. Join Rocky Mountain gun owners and be a part of the work that they're doing there. All right. Well, I'd love to get your calls and texts on this. 303-696-1971. 303-696-1971. Are we wrong on this? Do we have a gun problem in this state with mass shootings and we need to pass a ban on firearms used in public mass shootings? Or is this just an effort to go after your constitutional rights and it's going to be shot down by the U.S. Supreme Court? And thank God we have the Second Amendment because we want a well-armed citizenry. Give me a call, 303-696-1971. Text us on the 710 KNUS app. Here's one text message. Jeff, a well-regulated militia being necessary to secure a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The reason our founders gave us the Second Amendment is to keep the government subservient to the people. The second reason is to ensure citizens have the ability to protect their own lives from all enemies, foreign and domestic. There are no other reasons. When the government wants to take your guns, it's because the government is your enemy and they plan on subjugating you. It's an act of war. When good people make good laws, we should comply. When evil people make unconstitutional laws, it's our duty to challenge them.
Where's the militia?
Right. So
where is it? That was the beginning statement there.
Right.
That was my response.
And the Supreme Court has litigated this, and it all comes down to the comma. And believe it or not, if you read the Supreme Court decisions, they look at the nature of those commas there, and where does the right actually exist? Does it exist with the militia or does it exist with the people?
Yeah, it's a dependent independent clause. That the dependent clause puts constraints on the independent clause. That's basic English. That's English that you learned in middle school and also in high school. So there absolutely are constraints on the Second Amendment. And it also, the Supreme Court has been deciding different things, that up until recently, they never protected an individual right to own a gun. It was always focused on the militia and what the role is of the militia up until, recently. So it wasn't as if we've had this entire long history of the Supreme Court defending an individual right to own a gun. That's new in our court cases. That's absolutely new constitutional law. That's not what they had done for over 100 years before that.
And I would point out that I think the U.S. Supreme Court was looking at the history and felt like it connected more with an individual right than a militia. All right, give us a call or your texts. You're listening to The Jeff and Bill Show.
News Talk 710, KNUS.
Good morning. Welcome back to the Jeff and Bill Show. We just hosted a conversation with Dudley Brown on this bill being heard down at the state capitol. It's going to go after your Second Amendment rights. Bill and I had a little bit of a spirited discussion.
A little bit.
The National Constitution Center, a 5-4 majority ruled that the language and history of the Second Amendment showed that it protects a private right of individuals to have arms for their own self-defense, not a right of the states to maintain a militia.
Yeah, that's new, though. That's not the history of the of constitutional law. If we go back as far as what Supreme Courts have decided, that's new. It's relatively new based on the most recent individual ruling.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it can change, just like we changed Roe Wade. Yeah, because Roe versus Wade was decided 50 years ago, and we've changed that. So yes, based on precedent and based on current constitutional makeup and current Supreme Court makeup, yeah, it can change. But that isn't. But the idea that I keep hearing that this is the history of a proud right of an individual and the courts have defended that. No, not at all. If you go back and look at the history of it, no, it hasn't. It has not defended an individual right.
That was the originalist interpretation. That was the originalist interpretation.
No, that was the interpretation that was made now, and they called it originalist. That's not how it had been. No, I'm serious. This is.
I
you
know
go back
you're
through history.
serious.
This is not how it has been adjudicated for years and years and years, and that's okay because precedent can change and be overturned. Roe versus Wade, as an example. We have Brown versus Board of Education. We have a series of them. And we can go back and look at things that have changed, Jim Crow laws, a whole bunch of other stuff. So yes, the idea that is this idea is new, though, of an individual right to own a gun. Before it was always qualified by group participation. But,
I think
we can do what we want.
I think that they had to clarify that because our culture is changing, not because the actual law changed.
That could be part of it.
Let's check into the news with Blake Olson. Good morning, Blake. What are you working on, my friend?
Sorry about that. I got to get my mic up here.
Blake's looking up constitutional law.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I have it right here. And let's see. Okay, yeah, I'm going to keep my guns. Thank you very much. And I'm going to fight to keep them. And we can talk all we want about it, but I can't wait to hear your discussion throughout the morning. Yeah, we're going to talk about fentanyl found in a 4th grade school bus in southern Colorado. A huge story. And this is just frightening. Everyone has to be on guard for this and continue to talk to your kids about this. And March Madness tipping off for CSU today. And tonight we'll also discuss more legislation, big government, just trying to take all of our freedoms away. Back to you. Top of the hour.
I appreciate it, Blake. Thanks so much for being on this. Let us know what you think about this bill down at the state capitol being introduced today to be heard around 10 a.m. House Bill 24-1292. It believes that if we ban assault weapons, we are going to stop mass shootings. That's the point of it. If we ban assault weapons, we will stop mass shootings. Then you get into the description of what is an assault weapon and all the details around that. So do you think this is a good thing for the state of Colorado? Do you think it's actually going to stop mass shootings from taking place? Or is this just a further step to try to take away guns that belong to law-abiding citizens? As I mentioned, we hosted Dudley Brown just a few minutes ago. And his argument is that this is one of many 19 bills down at the state capitol that are going after your Second Amendment rights. And it's going to result in a worse state if this happens, not only constitutionally, but safety-wise, right? As we get into how you stop a bad guy with a gun. Because if you think you're taking away guns from bad guys, they tend not to obey the law in the first place. So how do good guys stop bad guys with guns? Well, it takes a gun, and either you're going to call somebody, 100%,
Really?
100%.
Really? 100% of the time. That's the only way to stop the bad guy with a gun.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then can you please walk me through how Kendrick Castillo died?
Yeah. Well,
okay, how?
Who stopped him? Who actually stopped those guys? Because Kendrick delayed it, by all means. He actually paused the shooting that was taking place there. But it was good guys with a gun that finally got those guys down. and stopped and got the guns
he
out
held
of their
them down,
hands,
and
right?
there are other examples of them, people, rushing towards them and other.
Okay,
examples
so
of that.
the response is you are going to have to throw your body on top of them.
That's part of what is recommended in the training they give to kids at school right now.
So
that's
kids,
a lot of fun.
So
Yes.
we're gonna tell kids that to stop the bad guy with the gun, throw your body on them while we wait for the police to show up, which are good guys with guns.
We already do that. That's already part of the school safety trainings.
Do you think that's a good thing?
No, not at all.
Right.
I don't think it's a good thing, but I also don't think it's a good thing that the person walked into the school with the gun in the first place.
Right.
That's the thing that we're looking at. Is it's still, to me, is the access to the firearm. That's the issue to me, is that we keep talking about the idea that, oh my gosh, we can't do anything about all these people walking around and shooting, and we're not dealing technically with what they're using to do the killing. And I have an issue with that simply because the gun culture in America has changed. Now it is focused more on the idea of the military style weapons rather than sportsmanship, rather than the hunting that it was when I was a kid. It is changed in this country. How it's marketed, how it's presented is different. And so,
hyper masculine.
well, what we're seeing, but that's what we're seeing in the advertisements. I mean, I disagree with the bill the Democrats are running. I think it's way too much of an overreach. I think that they have completely lost their way, and I think that you and Dudley Brown are absolutely correct that they are using what sounds like a good bill in order to grab a whole bunch of other guns. To me, aren't necessarily an issue. But I have an issue with the military style weapons because that seems to be the preferred choice in these type of killings. And maybe, just maybe, we should be looking at that product. I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea to look at the access to this product. And the reason I have a little bit of an issue with some of the people that push so hard and view the Second Amendment as if it came down from Mount Sinai with Moses is that, one, we've had it changed, but two, I've also experienced y'all not wanting to have any background checks. That you can't figure out if you're selling the gun to a convicted felon or not if we don't have a background check. But gun rights people fought that for years, as if, no, we can't possibly do that. We can't figure out if the bad guys are getting the guns at that point. So I see unreasonableness on both sides, and in all honesty, pisses me off. I'm going to talk to the phones.
You got Bill going this morning. Give us a call, 303-696-1971. How you feel about this bill being introduced and whether or not it's good for the state of Colorado. We'll get to your calls and texts. By the way, do you have a high school student considering their college plans? Are they ready to discover more about their gifts and talents? Do you hope to see them become part of the next generation of Christian leaders? Your student is invited to Colorado Christian University's Discovery Preview. This week-long event is completely free. Discovery Preview is designed for students who desire to seek God's purpose and calling in their lives. Students are immersed in the community, culture, and mission of CCU. Workshops focused on calling, career, and Christ-centered leadership help them explore their unique strengths and potential career options. Their Christ-centered community takes students on a Colorado adventure to experience the beauty of the Rocky Mountains. Eligible students can also qualify for a $1,250 annual scholarship for attending. Don't miss Discovery Preview this summer, June 17th through the 21st. The event is designed for seniors and juniors in high school. And again, it's absolutely free. To learn more, go to ccu.edu/discovery. That's ccu.edu/discovery. We'll get to Ron and the text messages in a second. You're listening to The Jeff and Bill Show.
News Talk 710, KNUS.
All right, Jeff and Bill show. Let's get to You Choose the News, Mr. Bill.
Oh, thank you. I almost think I should use this song. No, but we can't do that. It is time for You Choose the News, everybody's favorite fake radio news game show, where I have spent mere moments this morning scouring the interwebs to find ridiculous stories about us humans, to give them fake names to play this really stupid fake game, because people in charge have no idea we are doing it, so we'd appreciate if you don't tell them. And as always, this is not sponsored by Roll 'em Out Shelves. They do not want to be associated with this frivolity, but they are a great company. Give them a call. Go see them, rollemoutshelves.com. They'll take care of all the organization in your home. All righty, gentlemen, Blake and Jeff, here are your stories this morning. Headline number 1, George Costanza approved. Headline number 2, the aliens have arrived. Headline number 3, what if they called it Botox? And headline number 4, Cook County hates public art. Your choice, sir.
I'm going anything George Costanza.
George Costanza approved. Here we're going to talk about the LA Dodgers. The Dodgers minor league baseball team is getting ready to participate in the Copa de la División, which is known as the Fun Cup. Now, as part of the Fun Cup, according to the Major League Baseball website, there are events that embrace the culture and values that resonate most. Now, this Los Angeles Dodgers affiliate is the Rancho Cucamonga Quakes, the Tremblores, as they are normally known. But for this season, they are taking on a new moniker, the Chaquetas, which means jacket in Spanish. Or does it? It might not.
I don't know.
See, the actual English technical translation is jackets. However, if you use it in a more colloquial way, as most of the Hispanic speakers do, it means being master of your own domain, for a George Costanza reference. So, yeah, that's the reference that they are using. For their team name.
Speaking of the Rocky Mountain Men's Clinic.
Exactly. It makes it really weird when you say to ask your teammate to give you a hand. Becomes very, very difficult and awkward. All righty, sir. Your second choice this morning. The aliens have arrived. Thank you. What if they called it Botox or Cook County hates public art?
Let's go with aliens.
Yes, the aliens have arrived. Recently, there was a 2014 meteor fireball just north of Papua New Guinea. They were certain there were vibrations that had happened, that they were getting messages from aliens. It was a signal that was heard by Johns Hopkins University-led teams, and they looked at it and they said, this is obviously communications from outer space, or maybe a truck. What they found is after they delved deeper into the actual signals, they corresponded with vibrations that were the same of a large truck rumbling near the location. So they did not pick up the aliens, instead, large vehicle. All righty. Mr. Blake Olson, your final choice this morning. What if they called it Botox or Cook County hates public art?
Man, Jeff took my Costanza. So jealous.
Sorry.
That's all right. I'll go with the Cook County art.
All right. Cook County hates public art. Prometheus has been sold. Well, actually, technically, it's Prometheus 3. And Franscona Sculpture Park, there has been a huge metal sculpture there for years in the state of Wisconsin. And recently, the city sold it off as scrap. The artist is rather mad about this, that it was only sold for about $200. He said, no, this is I worked so hard on it. And unfortunately, there's been a court case going back and forth in which the artist had agreed to remove the art under a reasonable amount of time. It's been 4 years. And the city said, you're taking too long. You won't even call us back. You've ghosted us. We're done. And they sold the art. And he's super mad. So, yes, that's it. Remember, this is not sponsored by Roll 'em Out Shelves. In your free time, get them to come and have a home estimate. They'll organize your kitchen or bath. Roll'emOutShelves.com. Do not tell them about You Choose the News. Back to you, sir.
7 o'clock hour. The DEA is going to be here. Might freak you out a little bit, depending on what you're doing this morning. You're listening to the Jeff and Bill Show.
News Talk 710, KNUS.
Good morning, Mile High City. You've tuned in to the Jeff and Bill Show on 710 KNUS. I'm your co-host, Jeff Hunt, along with the amazing Bill Thorpe, bringing you the freshest insights and hottest takes to kickstart your day. It's going to be a beautiful day in Denver, and we're gearing up for a whole morning of engaging discussion, critical analysis, and your calls, because this is where Denver's voice is heard loud and clear. So grab your coffee, Denver, and let's dive into the issues that matter to you most right here and right now. You may have heard this story about fentanyl being found on a charter school bus, or a chartered bus being used by fourth graders.
Colorado School District is sharing a statement after fentanyl was found on a charter bus that was carrying elementary-aged students. The drugs were found on that bus earlier this month, but it's not clear how the drugs got onto the chartered bus. District 60 in Pueblo is not identifying the bus company the students were on. In a statement shared by D60, they say the Colorado Springs Police Department is aware of the incident. Police are now working to get us additional details if they can. D60 tell us that they've reached out to every parent whose child was on the bus. They're urging parents to make sure their child did not take a pill home with them.
And it's not even a pill. It's a grain of salt that can kill you. Be careful of the grain of salt. It's just another day in the paradise that is Colorado. By the way, I'm so very grateful that Stephen Tubbs is doing this documentary. By the way, if you remember Stephen, he was a host here at 710 KNUS for many years. Brilliant, intelligent, and he's done a documentary on fentanyl and diving into these issues in the state of Colorado. In just a few minutes, we're going to talk with David Olesky. He's a DEA Rocky Mountain Field Division acting special agent in charge. We'll be diving into kind of the challenges that Colorado's facing on this fentanyl epidemic. So you're going to want to stick around for that, not miss that. Happening down at the state capitol in just about an hour, Rocky Mountain Gun Owners is hosting a rally against a bill being introduced by the stately Elizabeth Epps and Tim Hernandez, those radical anti-Semites that have been down there creating havoc. They're deciding at this point at the state capitol to now go after your Second Amendment rights. And they've introduced a bill that they say is going to target weapons used in mass shootings, but really is an effort to go after your Second Amendment rights. 8 a.m., Rocky Mountain Gun Owners rally down at the state capitol. If you want to join them, it's on the west steps. You don't have to register anything. You can just show up. But if you do want to testify, I put up on my Twitter account, if you go to twitter.com/Jeff Hunt, there's a link there. If you want to testify against Colorado's Democrats' effort to take away your guns, it's House Bill 24-1292. It's being heard around 10 a.m. this morning. Dudley Brown, who joined us in the 6 o'clock hour, said that nearly 1,000 people, they believe, have signed up to take on that bill, which would make this a record. I remember fighting a lot of the radical abortion bills down at the state capitol, and we would have, 500 people sign up to testify, I think was probably our record. The idea that they're near 1,000 is just remarkable. That bill being heard around 10 a.m. this morning. So a whole lot of news already just in the first hour. In the 8 o'clock hour, we're going to get into free speech and the internet. 2 U.S. Supreme Court cases yesterday on this, one having to do with New York, the other having to do with how the Biden administration dealt with people who posted about the COVID-19 vaccines, those types of things on social media. So 2 U.S. Supreme Court cases yesterday, and then Don Lemon and Elon Musk got into it over free speech. We're going to cover that issue as well. In the 9 o'clock hour, Keith Humphreys, a professor at Standford University, wrote a viral article, one of the most read yesterday on The Atlantic, Why Oregon's Drug Decriminalization Failed. He dives into that. If you remember, it was just a few years ago that the state of Oregon was like, go at it, guys. And we're not going to put you in jail, but we're going to hope you get some help if you want it, but we're not really going to follow up with you. It was an utter disaster. They've rolled it back. And what does this mean for the drug decriminalization, drug commercialization movement across the country. All of that in the 9 o'clock hour. So you're going to want to stick with us through all this. Let's check in on the news with Blake Olson. Good morning, Blake.
All right. Good morning, Jeff and Bill. 32 and clear in Denver, expecting a beautiful day with highs in the low 60s today. The 7-10 5-day forecast is coming up. Our top story, as Jeff just mentioned, parents on alert after fentanyl was found on a bus chartered by a Pueblo school. Fourth graders at Highland Park Elementary went on
we got the robots in the system again. We'll check in with Blake in just a second, see if we can get the internet back from him. All right, we don't have him yet. Let me give you the weather here. By the way, happy first day of spring. It's Tuesday, March 19th. First day of spring begins today. 63 degrees today.
Fun?
All right, Blake, we got you back. Go ahead, my friend.
All right. Well, you talked about the fentanyl. Just be aware. Talk to your kids about it. Just a scary situation in Pueblo and southern Colorado and all over the state, straight up I-25. I mean, we have to be aware of this. In the 8 o'clock hour, as you mentioned, state capitol steps coming up. The Rocky Mountain gun owners holding a rally as big government continues to attack the Second Amendment. Gun rights lobbyist Dudley Brown on the show as the state tries to take away almost every firearm with the new bill being introduced.
Gun owners in this state are under assault. That is not an exaggeration. This state is circling the drain on Second Amendment issues. And it's largely because the great number of firearms owners in this state are just asleep. They just said, it'll never affect me.
Governor Polis expected to sign a bill banning the term excited delirium. The state Senate passed it Monday, sending the legislation to his desk. The bill would keep first responders from using that term in training or reports. Primary elections are set for 5 states today. Arizona, Florida, Illinois, Kansas, and Ohio will all have elections, even though President Biden and former President Trump, of course, have already passed their respective parties' delegate threshold. Congress needs to pass legislation to avoid a partial government shutdown at the end of the week, with funding set to run out for 6 annual spending bills. Lawmakers were able to reach a tentative deal Monday night on funding the Department of Homeland Security, which is seen as paving the way for lawmakers to begin considering the remaining spending bills and avert a shutdown. Nearly 1,000 Americans have reached out to the State Department for help in Haiti, where gang violence has plunged the nation into chaos. The U.S. trying to get people out on chartered flights. Former Prime Minister Laurent Lamothe from Haiti on with Tucker last night.
Nobody's in power. So they're coming up with different formulas, one of which creating a council, a presidential council of 5 members to rule Haiti and taking inputs from different political parties in order to rule Haiti until elections. But elections has to be the first and foremost focus of what's going on.
All right, the news brought to you by Lair Fireplace and Patio, Denver's premier source for everything fireplace, patio, and grills, locally owned and operated since 1954, online at lairfireplacepatio.com. 30 in Lafayette, 31 in Highlands Ranch, 32 in Denver. March Madness tipping off tonight for CSU. They take on Virginia in the play-in game in Dayton, Ohio. The winner takes on Texas on Thursday. CU will take on Boise State tomorrow night in Dayton as well. The winner faces Florida in Indy. The Avalanche going for 7 straight at St. Louis tonight, the Nuggets and the T-Wolves this evening. Jeff and Bill continue. Blake Olson, News Talk 710 KNUS.
The 7-10 5-day forecast, sunny to partly sunny and mild. Low 60s today, 30s tonight, 60s Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So through Friday, Very nice weather, very spring-like. Welcome to spring. It happens at 9:06 p.m. tonight. We're going to be fair, dry, and mild through Friday. Increasingly cloudy and cooler, though, for the weekend. Late Saturday night, Sunday into Monday. Chances of showers developing and temperatures trending colder. Meteorologist Don Day, 710 KNUS. The 710 5-day forecast, sunny to partly sunny and mild. Low 60s today, 30s tonight, 60s Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So through Friday, very nice.
All right, joining us on the line is the acting special agent in charge for the DEA Rocky Mountain Field Division, David Olesky. David, thanks so much for being on the Jeff and Bill Show, News Talk 710 KNUS.
Good morning.
Hey, gentlemen, good morning. Thanks for having me on today.
Absolutely. I appreciate all the work the DEA does. You guys are on the front line of one of the most important, critical wars. And I use that word directly. This is not just a battle. This is a war to protect our country from this fentanyl epidemic. Can you give us an update on how the state of Colorado is doing right now?
I've often said that when you end up hearing about fentanyl on a national level, that Colorado is not immune from what we're seeing across our country, whether it's the fentanyl we're seizing or sadly the poisonings that are happening across our country. And just yesterday, I started the week off, and you had mentioned Stefan earlier. So me and Stefan were having a conversation yesterday morning of kind of recapping what had just happened, over the course of the weekend, some seizure events. And I was recanting to him. I was like, listen, did you see these photos? We ended up seizing somewhere between 150,000, 200,000 fentanyl pills over the weekend.
No,
we went through like a couple of, and that was just, a load coming into the Denver area. And it was almost as if like every other day last week, we were seizing somewhere between 50 to 100 pounds of meth, in excess of 100,000 fentanyl pills. And I'm showing stuff in the photos. And, in what we do, I feel like I'm talking about fentanyl all the time is what I do. And I feel like the public, and I've been on your station, many times before. Again, thanks for having me on your show for the first time. And Stefan was like, you need to go out and talk about all these recent seizures. And I said, well, I feel like, how does the public take it? I mean, I've come on, probably every 3-4 weeks, I feel like I'm on the show talking about record amount of seizures in the metro area here in the state. I mean, just last month, we were talking about, a record 2023 we were somewhere around 2.6 million fentanyl pills seized in Colorado last year. And just in the first 3 months of this year, I don't doubt we're somewhere around 1 million pills just in the last 3 months. And that's from all across the state of Colorado. So we are on pace for here in a record year again. So, I mean, if your listeners, they're driving right now or, home listening to your show, and all they can probably end up hearing me say every time I come on is record, record, record. And, I said to Stefan, well, what is it that I can do and come on and talk about that's going to end up, being maybe something different? And, we ended up saying there is nothing different other than it's more. And we said, all right, let's table the conversation. We went around our day yesterday, continuing just our case stuff, our administrative stuff, and the story that you had led off the top of the hour with about the story with, the charter bus and fentanyl pills found on the bus had come out. And obviously that led to us coming on today just to at least address it. But if the story was just, 60 fentanyl pills found on a charter bus, would you have me on the show today necessarily? Because it's 60 pills that were seized, last week. We weren't even going to be coming on if we ended up talking about 100,000 pills or the 1 million pills seized this month. But sadly, because, as you had told the basic facts of the story, where there's a charter bus that was rented out to one of the school districts down in the Springs area. And at the end of the day, after the kids had gone on their field trip, just the cleaning crew had come on and had found, what they suspected was narcotics, and they called the Colorado Springs PD to come out and look at it. And it was true that it was fentanyl and tested positive for fentanyl. And then obviously the story has come on where, hey, there were fourth graders that were on this bus just hours prior. And so, the team down there is looking into it. But in the grand scheme of things, it's more so that as a parent, you're probably listening to it and saying, oh my gosh, I have to worry about my fourth my fourth grader now with this situation. And what I'll say is this story did not surprise me, as I said, from the standpoint of 50 or 60 fentanyl pills left on a bus. It could be the same thing if you're like, hey, your local fast food place found a couple of fentanyl pills sitting in at a table in the restaurant. It is so prevalent out there, and it's not just the supply of fentanyl, it's also the price. So you might look at it and say, wow, 50 pills, why would somebody leave that behind? Well, sadly, the cost for the cartels and the traffickers to make this, it ends up basically working out to just a couple of pennies. If you ended up dropping your candy on the floor, your M&Ms, would you pick it back up? Maybe not, right?
Right.
And so that's how cheap this product is. But when you start connecting the dots and you see the exposure that, in this instance, these young kids were exposed to, it's just certain, right? It's shocking, right? It's shocking. And I think it was Blake who mentioned, again, at the top of the hour, he said, hey, talk to your kids.
Yeah.
And that's the core of what this message continually has to be day in and day out, because well, I'm not 100% certain that it was pills. Definitely, I think it was. That's where, as a kid, if you're looking at this, or you're not so intimidated by a pill just sitting on maybe in a chair on the bus. So, where they might want to pick it up. And so that's the alarming part of what's going on right now.
Talking with David Olesky, acting special agent in charge for the DEA Rocky Mountain Field Division. Are you guys having success stemming this? I mean, you kind of mentioned that there's now already in the first few months 1 million pills that you guys have confiscated here in the state of Colorado and captured. Is the tide turning, or are things getting worse on this issue?
I think, like, just as I outlined the last couple of minutes talking about, yes, we're having investigative successes. That's what we do, is try to enforce the law, put those behind bars most responsible for trafficking it. But as a state or as a country, can we say we're having success? If what we're talking about is people continue to be poisoned, or the story that we just retold on the bus, that's very hard, I think, for me in my position, or us, to say we're having blanket success and we're turning the tide. That's not gonna, I don't think any of us can say that until the deaths are significantly lower. We've talked about the CDC had come out with the numbers for the 12 months ending, I think it was September, October, and the numbers are still at 111,000 drug deaths last year, the majority of those due to fentanyl. So how can we end up saying there's success?
What would it take in your mind? Is it longer prison penalties? Is it a tighter border? Is it more funding into the DEA? How do we combat this crisis in a more effective way?
It's yes to every one of those. And I think if you go back when you had opened up and you had said this war, right? You were calling it a war, right? For decades now. You go back to the 70s, it's always been said the war on drugs.
Right.
But are we truly fighting it as a nation in terms of a war? I say that our schools and, parents listening, hey, if your kid comes home, ask them when, or her, when's the last time somebody in a school district started talking about fentanyl and the dangers of these drugs? If you start looking at, you had brought up sentencing, how long are some of those individuals trafficking this poison, staying behind bars? You talked about the border. It's obviously a factor in this as well. And so you got to go through, and you could talk about our budget as well. All of those things are a part in this. And I think it's always easy to point, well, this doesn't work, or that doesn't work, incarceration doesn't work. Well, it really is going to take at this point, and always would have, every single component of that has to be addressed, and it's not a one size fits all. We didn't bring up the mental health side, the rehabilitation side. That's a part of this too. And it's not just one of those things when you're talking about the magnitude of this epidemic.
Yeah, I've always been a little bit on the outside of my culture on this because I'm a millennial. I grew up and, you had this thinking that ran through my generation. Oh, the war on drugs failed. The war on drugs failed. We got to step away. And in the 9 o'clock hour, we're going to host Keith Humphreys, who wrote an article in the Atlantic yesterday about how the drug decriminalization effort in Oregon was an utter disaster. I have watched drugs ruin the lives of those closest to me. It killed my very best friend. I utilized marijuana regularly in middle school, and I watched it just wreck my brain. My grades plummeted. So I'm not of the kind of mindset of my generation that like, oh, people are going to use anyways. So let's just, I see these as insidious attacks on human beings, this drug culture. And frankly, I wish our culture and our government would put a lot more effort into just saying this is unacceptable. And if we've got to put you in jail because you're a distributor, we're going to put you in jail. And then you get to this other extreme. Well, we don't want to put people in jail because they have a joint in their pocket or anything like that. But this is a war. This absolutely is a war. It's a war against very bad people who are ruining our culture, addicting our neighbors and our friends and our family members. And we should put them away for a very long time and not accept this as a culture. So sorry, David, I could get going off on this, but it's so personal to me that I want us to fight this harder. I'm so glad that the DEA is out there, and I wish you guys had more support. Let's talk a little bit about the cartel activity that's taking place in the state, because this isn't just Joe Schmo on the corner dealing dime bags. This is a coordinated commercial operation to get as many users as they possibly can and to make as much money as they possibly can. Can you give us some insight into the extent and the size of the cartel activity?
No, I think you outlined like the dichotomy of sometimes perception by society that law enforcement or DEA is going after that individual, smoking a joint on the street corner. I'll tell you, that's not our priority. Our priority is fentanyl, which is killing, Americans, and the cartels. And those two cartels that we're laser focused on is the Sinaloa cartel and Jalisco cartel. And you have to look at it as a multi-billion-dollar, not million, but billion-dollar enterprise. And that's how the cartels have, basically over the years, imported a variety of drugs into our country, whether it's meth or cocaine. And, in recent years, they've just basically added another product to their product line, which is fentanyl. And here in the, Denver metro area, it really is at the crossroads where you have, and I think it was brought up earlier, the I-25, I-70 freeway. Those two corridors are kind of the main arteries which come into this metro area, supplying fentanyl, meth, to the region. And so we have at this moment probably anywhere from 3 to 4 dozen cases just in the state of Colorado alone tied to these two cartels. And, when you talk about the presence of it, it's often when you say cartel, it feels as if it's often this far distant land, and it's not here in the state of Colorado. You say cartel and almost has this association with it's south of our border. It's not here. Well, the cartel associates, their networks, are here in the area. We have so many cases that we're focused on, and the relationship that the cartels have with local gangs, in distributing their narcotics, it's significant.
So Stephen Tubbs has a trailer out for a film called Devastated. It's going to be released later this spring. If you go to Mountain Time Media, you can, on YouTube, you can watch that trailer there. This is personal for Stephen as well as it is for me. We hate watching our state fall apart to this drug culture, to the addiction. And what Stephen does in his documentary is get into the personal lives, the stories of family members, moms, opening the door right to their kids and finding them dead in their own bedroom because of a fentanyl overdose. We're talking online with David Olesky. He's the acting special agent in charge, DEA, Rocky Mountain Field Division. What do you say to parents as we wrap here? What do you say to parents who are concerned about this? Fourth graders yesterday being on the bus with fentanyl pills found. How do parents talk to their kids about this?
Number one, have that tough conversation. I know it's I have kids myself, And my daughter always says, "Dad, you're talking about the F word again." And she knows what fentanyl is. She knows, the pills, the form they come in. And that's what I would say. I've met over the last 18 months. We've held multiple family summits. We call it meeting with families who've lost a child, a spouse to fentanyl, and we call it poisonings because these folks did not know what they were taking. And so for parents, I say if you're one, giving your kid access to social media, via some iPad or a cellular phone, and they're accessing apps, that's the time you got to start talking to them. And even if it's just a basic conversation of showing them photos of the pills and what not to take, the thing that's very scary about the story with the bus is because these pills are on there, and kids take their morning vitamins, they take different types of medicines in pill form, and there's no stigma associated with it. And so what I'd say is go to dea.gov.gov, and we have resources on there talking about our One Pill Can Kill campaign, talk about kind of tips and advice videos that we have on there that you can watch, and just to have a very basic conversation. And that would be my advice to parents, anyone who's listening to it. You can be an advocate for the change that we're talking about that we need. When you say, what do we need to do earlier, it's to continue to talk about it and try to reach this where I think nowadays a lot of people know and have heard about fentanyl, but they might not just necessarily know in what form it comes in or what it looks like. And a lot of folks might say, I would never take it. Well, that's why we end up calling these poisonings that are happening, because there's a deception that goes along with it. And in a number of the instances, we've seen folks taking what they call rainbow fentanyl, also goes by Skittles, because they come in these rainbow colored forms. They look like candy in a sense, where they might be very, attractive to folks who don't know what they are. And so that's my quick and most important tip is just have the conversation. If you're somebody, out there saying, oh man, am I going to have this tough conversation with our kid? And I remember talking to a parent who was speaking before an audience, and she had said, hey, listen, I would do everything, over again to have that tough conversation with my daughter, if she was still here with me today. And I think that's the key thing and lessons I've learned. And, meeting with parents who've lost somebody to this epidemic.
We've got a larger drug culture issue too, especially in this state. And what I say to my kids, my best friend of my entire childhood died of a cocaine overdose when he was 20 years old. We all started smoking pot together when we were in middle school. Now, not everybody who smokes pot goes on to do hard drugs, but everybody doing hard drugs started with the easier stuff early on. I think we got to direct and confront this entire drug culture and not be like, oh, it's okay for us to go smoke some pot, to take some psychedelic mushrooms. But when the hard stuff comes, you got to keep that away. I think you got to keep all of that away from your kids and keep them totally clean of that. David Olesky, Acting Special Agent in Charge, DEA, Rocky Mountain Field Division. I can't believe I just confessed all my drug use to a DEA agent.
Thanks for sharing the message this morning. I think that's what's most important.
Yeah. David, thanks so much for being on the show. Our friend and former colleague here, devastated, documentary on Mountain Time Media on YouTube. Stephen Tubbs documentary there, Devastated. Mountain Time Media on YouTube. That's going to be coming out in just a few months, I think. You're going to want to watch that full documentary. It'll be great.
That was a scary conversation. The one thing that you touched on the end is the conversation that parents need to have with kids. That was the one thing that I was really concerned about is, as a parent, having that conversation. And I think it's because drug culture in our lifetimes has changed somewhat.
Yes. Big time.
Yeah, it was much about, the being scared, much about the negative consequences. They focused more on individual harm and things that can happen when we were growing up. And then there became more of an acceptance. And I have a theory behind part of that. And I think part of it has to do with how we treated marijuana as being the equivalent of cocaine, crack, fentanyl, heroin. And this is just a personal opinion, that the kids turned around and went, well, if they weren't telling me the truth about how bad the marijuana is, are the other things not as bad either? And it made the other drugs more acceptable to that group of kids just based on their experience. And I think that hurt the message a little bit. And then our culture became, our society became much more liberal with it. We've got a guest coming up later that I don't want to spoil that talks about what happens when you decriminalize absolutely everything. And then we talk here about taking steps here to decriminalize and even create safe drug injection sites. When we are as a society talking about creating a safe space for someone to do their hard drugs, we've tilted the conversation. The drugs no longer cause a harm because we're trying to, you understand, because when they talk about it's a harm reduction center.
Oh, yeah.
So they're talking about the idea that when you do these drugs, we're lowering the harm to you.
Right.
We're making it more accessible. We're saying it's okay. That's the underlying message in that fallacy of a safe drug injection site.
Yep.
That any way you can do those type of drugs is safe. It's not true. And that's the problem we are having. And I'm worried about parents not having those hard conversations that we had where one pill can kill you. One. It's, there's no mistake.
Right. Dan, Bill, I appreciate that. I've done 3 or 4 pretty public debates on marijuana, including with Rob Corey, moderated by CBS 4. I was like the anti-marijuana guy in the state for many years at CCU. I debated at Turning Point, and we hosted a debate at CPAC too on this issue. And what's never included in this conversation, a lot of it's centered around personal liberty and freedom and that type of thing, right? Let's not put someone in jail for having a joint in their pocket. So he mentioned it. Do you know how many people died of fentanyl overdoses last year? Did you remember that stat?
No, I don't remember.
This is a little over 100,000 people.
Jeez.
Okay. Do you know how many died of tobacco related?
No.
400,000.
Oh, that would make sense.
So there's a commercial capitalistic element to addiction.
Oh, yeah.
That I really try to hammer, right? So what we've done is essentially turn marijuana into tobacco 2.0.
Yeah.
And you have John Boehner on video running around going, we're not going to sit this one out. He sits on the board of Philip Morris. He's like, we're not sitting this out. We're going to get into the marijuana industry. As someone who's a free market capitalist, I understand the power of the free market. And you didn't just decriminalize marijuana, you commercialized it. And you've opened up to the free market the desire to get as many people using the product as they possibly can. So this isn't your ditchweed that you get from your uncle that you sit in the back porch, and you now have a multi-billion-dollar industry laser focused on getting you to become a regular user. And so this is where I really make you ready? This is where I make the whole state of Colorado angry. Are you ready for this?
Yeah.
Prohibition works.
Does it?
See, there it goes. See, prohibition works. It absolutely 100% works, because the biggest threat you have to health issues and death and human suffering is the commercialization of addictive products, not the banning of addictive products.
Yeah, I can see the commercialization, but the prohibition, I would be curious on your definition of work. How do we judge that? What is the functionality of the prohibition working? And that would be the question: is what does it mean? So and it's odd because I could pick up that base argument of the idea of prohibition preventing that and flip it into our talking conversation
Second
last
Amendment.
Hour. Yeah. I mean, you could take that same argument and place it in that realm and make it and say, well, if prohibition of these drug substances works, then wouldn't prohibition of a firearm work in order to lower the harms in society that we see from them? And I'm talking about random shootings and things like that. So again, interesting conversation. I agree with you on the commercialization. I think that becomes a real problem when you're dealing with things like tobacco, alcohol, and marijuana and other things. There are other things we can roll into that. Things like, social media. We know that social media, the algorithms are based on addictive principles. Same thing with gambling.
And now you've got a big move to prohibit that, especially access to youth, which is going to be our conversation tomorrow, by the way. We have another researcher from NYU on this. Question here about alcohol, right? So when you get into whether or not prohibition worked, because I've researched this over and over and over again, because I've had these big debates on this, liver cirrhosis went down, spousal abuse went down, all that stuff, those things that are attached with alcohol use went down during Prohibition. And now you have the Denver Post. Go to the denverpost.com. Front page, you have a 4-story series on the abuse of alcohol that's taking place in our culture right now and all the problems associated with it. So, even though I'm a beer fan, a whiskey fan, but this is all part of the conversation. But when you get this blanket, well, Prohibition never worked. Well, depend on, like you said, Bill, define work. Okay. Yep. Jeff on here for my friends at Dan Caplis Law. Dan suggests that you should choose a lawyer who shares your values, because who you choose to represent you in an injury case says a lot about you to everyone involved in the case. Dan Caplis is the son of a police officer. Dan is also a former seminarian. Dan has dedicated the last 40 years of his life to helping people who are hurt in serious motor vehicle crashes. Dan is believed to be the only lawyer in Colorado history to win 5 straight multi-million-dollar verdicts in Colorado crash cases. Dan is also believed to have won the largest truck crash verdict in Colorado history. Dan Caplis Law is the official law firm partner of the Denver Nuggets and the Colorado Avalanche. Dan Caplis Law is a serious firm for serious cases. Dan accepts righteous injury cases based on a percentage fee basis so that he can represent good people from all walks of life without regard to ability to pay. If you need Dan's help, call 303-770-5551. That's 303-770-5551, or hit dancaplisLaw.com. That's Dan, C-A-P-L-I-S law.com. What do you think of this conversation? Give us a call, 303-696-1971, 303-696-1971. The challenge this state and nation is facing on fentanyl. What do we do about it? What do we do about it? I asked David Olesky that with the DEA. He gave some great examples. We need to tighten our border. We need to better fund the DEA. We need to hold traffickers to greater imprisonment time. Do you agree with all that? Give us a text message on the 710 KNUS app as well. You're listening to the Jeff and Bill Show.
News Talk 710 KNUS.
being telegraphed back to the 1990s. Creed.
Yeah.
Good morning. You're listening to the Jeff and Bill show.
He's got some new stuff now, Scott Stapp.
I don't know what happened to these guys.
Well,
it is fun to be in this new job because you guys. So when I worked at a university for 8 years, I was surrounded by bibliophiles and academics who would be like, "Did you hear about this new book and this new academic paper and all this stuff?" And they get into details. And now I'm around audiophiles who are like, "Well, Creed put out a new album," and I'm like, "I haven't thought of Creed since the '90s."
It's Scott Stapp. He's got a solo album now. He's hooking back up with Creed. They're going to do a reunion tour, but he's got his own song, and the song is "Higher Power." It's pretty good. It's let's just say that they had some problems because Scott spun out of control.
Really?
Oh yeah, he had some.
There was like some Christian overtones.
Yeah, there's a lot, stuff. But he found himself in the midst of oddly enough addiction and some other things afterwards, and that led to him leaving the band, some real issues with lead guitarist and some other things, and he's kind of cleaned things up now and back more on the straight and narrow. So,
is this because you do so much music?
In some of it, yeah, in some of it, but it's also just a passion. It's just stuff that I just absorb so much as far as where, and what I'm reading and why, and I have really interesting conversations about radio, music law, things like social media impacts of podcasting with other radio friends. Some really interesting, weird conversations about what's going on out there. I
came across this meme yesterday and sent it to Bill. Late last night, which for us late is 9 o'clock at night. It was a girl. There was a picture of her in 2004. I won a contest to DJ at my very small hometown's easy listening radio station. I proceeded to play an hour of Evanescence deep cuts and ruined everyone's morning commute.
Oh, that's great.
And I just wrote, "Is she related to Bill?"
Yes, absolutely. She has to be, because that's
I can see like a 14-year-old Bill be like, "I have control of a radio station. Let's do deep cuts from Creed."
Oh yeah, do some other stuff. Actually, I was not a Creed fan. That would not have been the one I went after. But yeah, I would have done some other deep cuts. There's some things that I pull that I do in some other genres and people that I talk to as far as music, that we're always talking about what deep cuts. I had a conversation with one of our rock guys the other day at Westwood about what we're programming and what type of songs are going to be in the power category and why. So kind of a thing. So
there you go.
Fun. Yeah.
Let's check in with Blake on the news. Good morning, Blake.
Or maybe not.
Hello.
Hey, there he is.
Hello.
I actually texted Billy. I thought I
past that 30 minutes.
Can you hear me, Billy?
We got you.
I got you.
Okay.
There. I did
I
not
thought
see a text.
I thought I rebooted and you couldn't see me. So I'm working on the fentanyl story.
You're looking great,
Madness.
Blake.
We're working on a hotel with all types of homeless people, trying to figure out ways to get to the next level, to get to the next step, as we say. But a lot of problems with those, and much more coming up at the top of the hour. Sorry about that. I thought you got that message, Bill.
Oh, sorry about that. I'll move where the phone is. I just didn't see it. Apologize.
Well, I'm glad I was on here.
Yeah. Would have been awkward.
I'll talk to you at the top of the hour.
Thanks.
If you want to see what Blake, Bill, and I look like, just go to our YouTube channel. There's the three of us right there.
Don't do that.
The Three Stooges.
It's not smart. You're eating.
We got a question here. How do you solve the drug cartel problem? You want my solution?
Yeah. What is it?
Public executions and heads on pikes.
But would that stop it?
Mm-hmm.
But what about the commercialization and the product moving? Because
that's later. So first of all, that's earlier first. So we as a culture decide we're not going to do it anymore. We're not going to put up with this. We're not going to let you addict our family members so you can make a profit, you pieces of crud cartel members. And then we go out there and put their heads on pikes.
Yeah, it's been tried numerous times, and I don't think it ever stopped the crime. I mean,
worked in the Middle Ages.
Not really. Not really. It's like, it killed people, but it didn't, because the profit motive still exists.
Yeah, but you got to get rid of it. Like if you look at drug use in the Middle East, you look at drug use in places. What is that? Where did they used to cane that kid?
Singapore.
Singapore. They don't have those problems.
Yeah, they do. Not on the same levels, but they do have drug use.
Point. Not on the same level.
They do have drug use, and they do still have cartels. I mean, they still have people that move it. Yeah, that still happens. Yeah, but the idea that you can't legislate morality. That's kind of what we're getting to in this. Is it just that can't be done?
Really?
Yeah. No, you can't.
Yes. Every law is morality.
No, but you can't,
every law is morality.
but you can't legislate morality. You can't legislate for people to be moral. Those are the consequences if you aren't.
So
You can't
I will
force them to be.
grant you this, that you can't write laws that the culture is not willing to embrace. Right? That is marijuana right now, right? Or it was for years. Right? If the culture is like, we find it harmless and we're going to go out there and use it, and you're out there trying to write laws, that's a waste of time. But you can absolutely change culture, right? We did this on tobacco. You ask kids these days about tobacco, generally, they're like, that's the most disgusting thing ever. And you're like, really? All of our grandparents used to sit around the house smoking. Like, that cultural change is amazing to me. That's something. But all laws reflect morality.
But we didn't necessarily legislate our way out of tobacco. And that it had more to do with cultural change. It had more to do. We didn't sit there and just outlaw everything and make it illegal. I mean, we've had rules and laws making murder illegal for as long as the country's been around. We still kill people. We still hold people responsible for it. So that's the issue. Is the laws are there. We can't legislate morality. The laws are there if someone steps outside the boundaries of what we decided as a society. But you can't, by passing a law, force someone to comply. That's the problem that I see in this example. That by sitting here and saying, we're going to make X, Y, and Z, and all this other stuff illegal and prosecute these people. Okay, that's fine. They're going outside, but you can't legislate the crime away necessarily, because there's still going to be that profit motivation that you talked about a minute ago, as far as why marijuana grows inside the country, because the commercialization of the profit motive. Same thing with the prohibition during the 20s and 30s and liquor. So same thing there. It was a profit motive, and so the crime moved in. We have the same argument with guns. If we outlawed guns, only the criminals are going to have the guns, and then we're going to make it profitable for the criminals to sell the guns. Same thing.
It's got your law has to reflect your culture, but you can push both at the same time and change things, right? I mean, they did that on tobacco. They absolutely did that on tobacco. They started to restrict it. They held it accountable. The AGs in these states started suing tobacco companies because they willfully knew their product was harming people and they're still making profit on it.
Yeah, so and manipulating it to be more addictive.
Right.
Again, same thing. Yeah, but it didn't say that we couldn't have tobacco. It said the manipulation and the other things in the marketing were the things that were illegal. So that's it. That's the part of the legislative morality. That's the difficult part about it. Yeah, you can't legislate someone to be a good person. You can't do it. That's dependent upon the person.
It's both hand. I think you can. I think you can legislate people to be good, moral people.
Then why do people keep killing each other? Why do we keep having abuse?
Right.
Why do we still have?
Because it's not at the extent that it would be if you didn't legislate it.
I don't understand what you mean by that, because we still have rules prohibiting.
Right. So if the argument we're getting into like debate level,
yeah, we are.
Like, this is college debate time.
Yeah, it is.
You're welcome to join the conversation. 303-696-1971, 303-696-1971, or text us on the 710 KNUS app. We all want a kinder, gentler way to experience wellness and to overcome pain. I'm thriving and fighting back my workout soreness with UltraCur. By the way, my boys and I were up at 4 a.m. this morning, and we did about 100 kettlebell squats, and I can hardly walk. Thank God I have UltraCur. UltraCur is a patented non-prescription natural capsule that works fast. Surveys show that 50% of people using UltraCur find relief within 48 hours, and half of those within 2 hours. Experience UltraCur for free. Go to any Denver Metro natural grocers and ask for the health coach or the vitamin manager for your free 3-day trial of UltraCur. UltraCur is fueled by patented technology to give you the true edge to support your peak wellness, energy, and active lifestyle. If you've tried everything without much success, even other natural curcumin products, you owe it to yourself to try UltraCur today. UltraCur gives you unique control over your daily wellness. It's gentle on your stomach, and it's a natural antioxidant. Get curious, Denver. Head to Natural Grocers, grab your free 3-day UltraCur trial. No strings attached. Wondering about the research? Get the lowdown at getultranow.com. That's getultranow.com. We'll get to your calls and texts. You're listening to The Jeff and Bill Show.
News Talk 710 KNUS.
Let's go to the phone lines here. Arnie from Littleton, you're on the Jeff and Bill Show, News Talk 710 KNUS. Good morning, Arnie.
Good morning. I was thinking about something. Look at the latest, most popular movie in the world, Dune, and it's about the spice, which is a super drug back then. And I just thought that it's interesting, and that's, year-wise, that's supposed to take place in something like the year 10,000, such and such.
Spice? I haven't heard of that.
Yeah, you're not a sci-fi guy. He's not familiar with Dune, and Dune's a metaphor. Yeah, Dune's a larger metaphor about some things, and spice in some ways is like oil is how it's kind of viewed. That's kind of the spice must flow. Yeah, it's a really interesting, really interesting example. Thanks for bringing that up, Arnie. And you're right, it's the commercialization behind the spice.
Interesting. Yep. Thanks, Arnie. Arnie from Littleton. Appreciate the call. Jim, we'll get to you next. Arnie's line is open, 303-696-1971. We're going to get into free speech in the next hour. You're listening to the Jeff and Bill Show.
Maybe we'll find out who Muad'Dib is. News Talk 710 KNUS.
Good morning, Denver. You've tuned in to the Jeff and Bill Show on 710 KNUS. I'm your co-host, Jeff Hunt, along with the big Dune fan, Bill Thorpe, bringing you the freshest insights and hottest takes to kickstart your day. It's a beautiful day in Denver. We're gearing up for a whole morning of engaging discussion, critical analysis, and your calls. like Jim, we're going to get to you in just a second. We are Denver's voice, loud and clear on the issues that matter most to you. So grab your coffee, Denver, and let's dive in to what matters to you right here, right now. We've had a lot this morning already.
Yeah, we have.
Dudley Brown joined us in the top of the 6 o'clock hour. Starting right now at 8 o'clock is a rally hosted by Rocky Mountain gun owners in opposition to a bill introduced by Elizabeth Epps and Tim Hernandez that's really going to seek to not just go after quote unquote assault weapons, but a lot of other guns as well.
Yeah, we don't always agree on the subject, but this bill is a way overreach. It definitely is. It says it's doing one thing, and it's doing something completely different. It's doing something that is much broader, and it's, again, even for me, it's a way overreach. But what would we expect? What would we expect? I want to see what happens with the testimony on Capitol Hill today.
Yep. And Dudley Brown said that they may have nearly 1,000 people signed up to testify. This bill is being heard right around the 10 a.m. hour. If they have 1,000 people set to testify, this will go for like 2 or 3 days. Because when we've been down there on some of these sanctity of life bills, we'd have like 300 or 400 people signed up to testify. And that would go about 12 hours. It would go till 2 or 3 in the morning.
Jeez.
So if they've got 1,000 people, this is a big deal. And look, me and Colorado's social libertarian nature don't always get along. Okay. Case in point, last hour on my advocation for prohibition.
Yeah, that was interesting. That was unexpected.
In many things. We could talk about prohibition in drugs, prohibition in pornography, all that good stuff. But guns is the one thing that me and the social libertarians get along with. And I sure hope that Coloradans show up in force against these. We used to recall these people introducing bills like this. And I'd like to see a little bit more of that down at the state capitol. Make Tim Hernandez, Elizabeth Epps get out of office, whatever it takes to get those crazy anti-Semites out of office, those radical leftists. That would be good. But that's a bill being heard today. And then in the 7 o'clock hour, we dived into the fentanyl issue. We hosted David Olesky. He is a acting special agent in charge for the DEA Rocky Mountain Field Division, and I confessed all of my drug use to him. So that was interesting. DEA will be showing up later, and if I make it to the 9 o'clock hour, that will be amazing in itself. So give us a call, 303-696-1971 on where you stand on all these issues, 303-696-1971. A lot of great text messages back and forth, too. We appreciate that. Let's check in on the news with Blake Olson. Good morning, Blake.
Morning, Jeff. Transparency is a great thing. 35 and sunny in Denver, looking out at a gorgeous day and another gorgeous day with highs in the lower 60s today. The 7-10 5-day forecast is coming up. Our top story, so much to think about and so much to fight, like fentanyl all across our state. Most recently, a group of fourth graders from Pueblo on a bus last week where fentanyl pills were more than likely left from a previous chartered trip. Thankfully, no kids found the pills. And unfortunately, David Olesky from the DEA says these are everywhere. So be on the lookout.
As a parent, you're probably listening to it and think, oh my gosh, I have to worry about my fourth grader now with this situation. This story did not surprise me, as I said, from the standpoint of 50 or 60 fentanyl pills left on a bus. It could be the same thing if you're like, hey, your local fast food place found a couple of fentanyl pills sitting in at a table in the restaurant. It is so prevalent out there, and it's not just the supply of fentanyl, it's also the price.
The open southern border that the Biden administration has created is not helping the crisis, and a controversial Texas law will remain blocked pending another approval. The law allows local police to arrest anyone they believe is in the country illegally. The Supreme Court issued a statement on that. And right now on the state capitol steps, as Jeff and Bill were discussing, Dudley Brown and the Rocky Mountain gun owners holding a rally, pushing back on the state as another bill is pushed to get rid of the Second Amendment.
Gun owners in this state are under assault. That is not an exaggeration. This state is circling the drain on Second Amendment issues. And it's largely because the great number of firearms owners in this state are just asleep. They just said, it'll never affect me.
Denver police have been called to a hotel shelter on Quebec Street more than 400 times so far this year. Officers say that many of the calls to the former Doubletree Hotel have involved drugs, assault, and domestic violence. And now a double murder that happened there this past weekend is being investigated. Homeless advocacy group House Keys Action Network Denver says there needs to be more accountability at the shelter. In response, the city announced a 7-point action plan to address the safety and security concerns. A 17-year-old suspect accused of causing a deadly crash in Aurora now faces a murder charge. Investigators say the teen or suspect was trying to evade police after stealing a car following a carjacking when he crashed into another vehicle. The driver of the other vehicle was reportedly parking when he was hit, and he died of his injuries. The 17-year-old is being held on suspicion of second-degree murder. Nearly 1,000 Americans have reached out to the State Department for help in Haiti, where gang violence has plunged the nation into chaos. A State Department spokesperson says that people have been filling out crisis intake forms online, and the U.S. tries to get people out on chartered flights. It is 30 in Boulder, 32 in Englewood, 35 in Denver. March Madness tipping off tonight for CSU. They take on Virginia. The winner takes on Texas Thursday. CU takes on Boise State tomorrow night in Dayton. The winner of that one faces Florida Friday in Indy. Jeff and Bill continue. Blake Olson, News Talk 710 KNUS.
The 710 5-day forecast, sunny to partly sunny and mild. Low 60s today, 30s tonight, 60s Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So through Friday, very nice weather, very spring-like. Welcome to spring. It happens at 9:06 p.m. tonight. We're going to be fair, dry, and mild through Friday. Increasingly cloudy and cooler, though, for the weekend. Late Saturday night, Sunday into Monday. Chances of showers developing and temperatures trending colder. Meteorologist Dante, 710 KNUS.
All right, the conversation's hot on the Jeff and Bill show. Let's check in with Jim on line 2 from Denver. You're on the Jeff and Bill show, News Talk 710 KNUS. Good morning, Jim.
Hey, good morning, fellas. This legalized marijuana in Oregon and Colorado, you could foresee this coming a long ways away. It's going to be a scourge, and it really, really is. Alcohol and these drugs that have infested our young people and our old people are really causing havoc with our society. And you brought up the prohibition, and I jokingly for 20 years now have said we should close all the liquor and marijuana stores and reopen them as Bible stores.
There you go.
and you hand out Bibles instead of drugs. Of course, that would be, ironically, that would be the morality police would have to enforce that. Would be like Saudi Arabia. And we like profit so much in this nation that, heck, Philip Morris might come in and take over the marijuana so they can industrialize it.
They are. They absolutely are. And they've already talked about that. There's lots of video. John Boehner, who sat on the board of Philip Morris, saying, we're not going to sit this one out. We're absolutely getting involved with it. And most of these companies have all these other shell companies. So driving a lot of the marijuana legalization effort, the lobbyists, all that stuff comes from groups like Altria, who are tobacco companies. So it's there. It's all about profit. But look, and to Bill's point, and I agree with this, I'd much rather have a cultural shift on an issue than just purely a legal shift, right? So if you go out there and you're like, well, I'd rather ban something, but the culture doesn't really want to ban it, you get marijuana in the 90s, right? It's like, well, people do it anyways, and no one really gets popped for it. But when you look at what we've done with tobacco culturally, where this next generation of kids are like, man, I don't want to touch that at all. That's stupid compared to where our grandparents' generation was, and they're like, they were smoking at dinner. So that cultural sea change that took place through education is far more powerful than writing laws, but I think they come both hand in hand. I think you've got to use the power of law as well. What do you think, Jim?
Well, I think Philip Morris is going to get a tax subsidy through the tax structure, and they're going to pay less in taxes because they're a for-profit business. They will have shareholders that will pull money out, and everybody's going to be making money on addicting people to something or another.
Yep.
And the fact that we have a border that we could restrict this fentanyl if we wanted to, if it didn't affect people's profit, is amazing. And it makes me reflect back to World War I, where the British Parliament, the business side of the British Parliament would refuse to stop sending raw materials to Germany because it would affect their profits. That was back in World War I, and people have been fighting this, and profit always wins out over morals.
Well, they'll stand up at a point, and Jim, you make a good point, and I appreciate the call. Jim from Denver, his line will be open, 303-696-1971. So much of what happens in our economy is rooted in addiction. Look at social media, but you finally do get people that stand up against it, and you're getting parents that are standing up against it. And we're going to get in this tomorrow on with a researcher from NYU, but you have a bipartisan willingness to address the addictive nature of social media as it relates to youth and the impact that that's having. And when people stand up, they can get laws passed.
Yeah, but addicted customers are the best customers.
That's exactly right. That is exactly right. They actually make up a vast majority. I remember I was sitting down at the Brown Palace one time. I was talking to a guy, and he had no idea who I was, and he was from the marijuana industry. And so I said, I asked him about high potency pot. So most of the stuff that people consumed in the 90s was like 7% THC. Right, THC is the active ingredient in marijuana.
Yeah, which is not available in hemp. Yeah,
right.
Product.
Right. Yeah. And they've now basically gone into labs like they did in Breaking Bad, and have created high potency pot that's like a waxy substance that gets very high THC concentrations. Yeah, up to 70, 80%. And you have to light it with a butane torch. It's like a crack cocaine version of marijuana. And I just floated this. I said, what if the state of Colorado put a ban on high potency pot? And the guy was like, bro, that's a majority of my business. Doesn't come from, Francine flying in from Florida to buy a little pot because she smoked it in the 60s and she thought she'd try it on her little trip to Colorado. It is the guy who buys it regularly, lives down the street, is addicted to it, has to have it every single day. That high potency pot is what is driving a good portion of the revenue for these marijuana industries. So to your point, Bill, you're exactly right.
And wax is that's a very high potency because you're distilling the flower down. By the flower, that's the flowering portion of the plant. So the majority of marijuana products that are sold, from my understanding, in Colorado are processed marijuana. It's no longer the bag of weed that we've seen in all the movies. Right. It's processed into either edibles, drinkables, or something like the wax. And the wax is basically taking, here's a great analogy. It's an imperfect analogy, but it kind of will make it understand, is if we unmade the margarita and just serve the tequila. That's what you're doing. You're taking, because the marijuana plant is the marijuana, but you're distilling out the liquid and you're distilling out the liquor. And that's what they're doing. And they're concentrating all that THC into one major delivery source.
Yes.
And that is a significant problem. It's a different game than what we saw with Cheech and Chong, regardless of how big their joint was. It's different. This is a different game. Yeah.
Question here. What about medical marijuana? This is something that I've loved to cover because our culture is so funny on this. Watching television at night, right? You will be bombarded by pharmaceuticals, right? So on one hand, our entire culture is based on pharmaceutical consumption, and all your news is sponsored by Pfizer and all this stuff.
We have stadiums. We have golf tournaments. We have, all that stuff.
And on one hand, you watch these commercials and you will find out every possible potential side effect that one person in a single trial dealt with being explained to the consumer, right?
Yeah.
You could have, a lifetime of diarrhea. Yes. Sorry for saying that. But all this stuff comes out on that. And then you get to marijuana and it's like, oh, you have a headache? Here's pot. Do we know how this is going to interact with your other medication? Not really.
Yeah.
Do we know what the long-term consequences of this use are? Not really. Is this going to affect your heart? Not really. And so we for whatever reason siphoned off marijuana into this one area. And I'll tell you why. We don't really dive into all that stuff. Because it doesn't really help you. Okay. There are some components of marijuana that can be beneficial for some ailments, like Epidiolex, right? And the FDA went through and they researched it and they found that it was beneficial. And so they took that small component and they ran it through for eye issues. Epidiolex is one of those drugs. And you go, okay, look, I have no problem with that. If marijuana is this amazing cure-all drug, and I've had debates with NFL players about this. One NFL player said, Jeff, it cures CTE. That's the traumatic brain issue that football players deal with. And I said to him, I go, bro, if pot cures CTE, I will walk with you in the parade that we throw because this miracle drug helped you.
Yeah.
Even the LA Times was like, stop saying pot cures cancer.
Yeah, no, it doesn't.
So you ended up with this kind of weird component of marijuana that it was a cure-all for all the drugs. And so it was all just about marijuana use.
It was the medical marijuana push was the first step in legalization because
100%.
It wasn't narrowly targeted. And you're right. There are some narrowly targeted instances in which marijuana and THC can be beneficial. There are things with reducing seizures. Mm-hmm. There are parts with the glaucoma. There are some pain benefits. I know some CBD oil users that talk about not having to use some of the pharmaceuticals for the the knee and those chronic aches and pains. So I think there is an application for them, but we just said, hey, come in and get your weed for whatever. And that was the problem. We didn't delineate and say, this is what it's good for.
No.
And that was the reason that it was the Trojan horse, because we just opened it up saying, come and get it for anything. If you have a hangnail, then you can come in and get it. Comedian Ron White had a wonderful stand-up about this. And he said that, yes, he had a medical marijuana license. And he would go and see his doctor and tell his doctor, and doctor's asking him and said, well, tell me what this helps with. And he says, it's my anxiety. It helps me a lot with my anxiety. And he goes, okay, tell me more about the anxiety. When do you get anxious? When I don't have any weed. So it helps you with that. So that's kind of what it was. It was self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yep.
So yeah.
That's exactly right. All right. If you're losing your hair and you need a simple solution that works, you want the best. Modern technology with top-rated physicians, something that's guaranteed to work. Guys, you need Dr. Tanya Pauls and her team at Advanced Hair. They've completely redefined hair restoration, from the experience itself to their unmatched results. Receding hairline, bald spot, or thinning hair, address them all with Advanced Hair's simple one-day treatment in a calm, relaxed environment with the most experienced professionals. Advanced Hair has performed tens of thousands of these breakthrough treatments. And get this, your own natural hair begins to regrow the very next day. No one in Denver can offer anything like the advanced FUE found at Advanced Hair, and I highly recommend their team. It starts with your free consultation. Call 720-459-HAIR. If you qualify, you'll also get $250 off and 250 free hair grafts. Refine your hairline with the team that's redefined hair restoration. 720-459-HAIR, 720-459-HAIR, or advancedhair.com. That's advancedhair.com. Let's get into this free speech issue. Yesterday, 2 U.S. Supreme Court cases on this, okay? Big ones that have to do with free speech, in both cases, from the government's perspective and how far they can go. This was actually kind of shocking. It was gut-wrenching to see the government use so much power and influence to drive their agenda in order to shut down those who are espousing a message that they disagree with. Supreme Court, this is from the Wall Street Journal, Supreme Court voices skepticism over social media censorship claims against government. And they kind of went in 2 different ways. But listen to this from Justice Jackson on the First Amendment.
So my biggest concern is that your view has the First Amendment hamstringing the government in significant ways in the most important time periods. What would you have the government do? I've heard you say a couple times that the government can post its own speech, but in my hypothetical, kids, this is not safe, don't do it, is not going to get it done. And so I guess some might say that the government actually has a duty to take steps to protect the citizens of this country. And you seem to be suggesting that that duty cannot manifest itself in the government encouraging or even pressuring platforms to take down harmful information. So can you help me? Because I'm really worried about that, because you've got the First Amendment operating in an environment of threatening circumstances from the government's perspective, and you're saying that the government can't interact with the source of those problems.
And Your Honor, I understand that instinct, and I guess what I tell you is our position is not that the government can't interact with the platforms there. They can and they should in certain circumstances like that present such dangerous issues for society and especially young people. But the way they do that has to be in compliance with the First Amendment.
All right. So 2 U.S. Supreme Court cases, both on free speech. One had to do with the Biden administration utilizing censorship on platforms like Facebook to suppress views against vaccines and lockdowns during the COVID-19 pandemic. And in that case, the Supreme Court seemed likely to reject a bid by Republican-led states to restrict the federal government from urging social media companies to remove allegedly misleading posts or disinformation on their platforms unless there is a threat of official retribution. All right, so it gets a little complicated here. Stay with me, but this is going to be very, very important. Many of us remember what it felt like was the Biden administration working with social media platforms to go after posts that they disagreed with. The question before the U.S. Supreme Court was yesterday, was the actions by the government that coercive to violate free speech, or were they just pushing back on messages that they disagreed with? So it has always been common practice for the government to press back on publications, posts, things like that they disagree with. They will, for instance, you guys maybe have seen the movie where they call the Washington Post or the New York Times, and they're like, don't publish the Pentagon Papers. It's really going to harm us. They can utilize their pressure. They have a right, the government said yesterday, and it seemed like the Supreme Court justices agreed with this, to be able to put pressure on that. Where the Supreme Court seemed to have problems, and this gets into another case, is when they start to utilize government power to punish publishers. That seems to be the delineating factor in these two cases. Bill, did you dive into these cases?
A little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the thing that I've got here is I understand the argument, but the way it's presented is, to me, a little bit myopic, only because it's not just the Biden White House that's doing this. It's the Trump White House that's doing this. And it was the Obama White House that's doing it. So the White House does this. So do private campaigns. So do companies. So do individuals reach out and ask for things to get taken down. And during all of the court cases and all the research and all the Twitter files, the part that I'm missing is the hammer from the government that here are going to be the consequences on you if you don't.
And that's where the NRA case comes in.
Yeah.
So you Wall Street Journal reporting yesterday on the first case that has to do with Biden and COVID-19 posts and Facebook like that.
Yeah.
Their analysis saying that is likely that the U.S. Supreme Court is going to side with the government on that side. New York Times, justices seem likely to side with the NRA in a First Amendment dispute. The National Rifle Association argued that a New York official violated the First Amendment by encouraging entities to break ties with the group after the Parkland mass shooting. A majority of the Supreme Court appeared on Monday to embrace arguments by the NRA that the New York State official violated the First Amendment by trying to dissuade companies from doing business. And it wasn't just a dissuading. It wasn't like, hey, I don't think you should utilize this. It's, we're going to investigate you. We're going to sic the power of the government upon your insurance business and regulate you at a different level if you continue to do business with entities like the NRA. So it was the difference being between these two cases is when the government started to pull out the hammer and go after entities for doing business based upon free speech claims.
Yeah, but it wasn't necessarily the Biden White House that was doing that. That's an official in New York.
No, this wasn't Biden. This was officials in New York.
And absolutely agree that what the officials did in New York are over the top, and it is the punishment mechanism that brings it over the top. Them just coming out and advocating for it, fine. I am a little upset about that. I don't think that a government official should advocate one way or another and say, hey, you need to do this. Saying, hey, this is what this group supports. You can make your choices is a better, softer way to do that. And you can say, and your choices obviously then show us what you support and what you think is okay or not okay. That's a soft way to express the exact same thing as stop advertising with them because they're horrible killers. Same thing. And that's the problem I have. But it is that enforcement mechanism, which, contrary to what I keep hearing, is not something I've seen from the Biden White House. And in fact, I mean, I hate to bring it up, but I've seen that talked about from a potential second Trump administration, that there is a hammer coming. Kash Patel famously talked about how they're going to come hard after media companies that they don't like. Donald Trump in 2017 talked about the idea that maybe they should be yanking broadcast licenses for people that he didn't like, for people that he felt were being fair to him, not untruthful, not fair to him. That's different.
When you read these cases, to your point, like what you just said, and I don't want to skip over that. When you read this case and you see the amount of coercion that the government does to things that they oppose, it's amazing. They get in there and they're like, listen, in the first case on COVID-19, it may not be we did a full use the hammer like the state official in New York did, but they put a lot of pressure on. And you're like, that's what happens with our government. So let me give you an example. Everybody knows I'm pro-life in the state, right? We're a pro-life leader. Imagine I get control of the government and the governor's house, and we start laying it on thick on anybody supporting Planned Parenthood. So we're not going to legislate, right? I'm not going to introduce a bill. We're not going to go to the state capitol. We're not going to have free and fair discussions around this, but we start calling Uber. You give a ride to somebody to Planned Parenthood, you're going to lose your license. Right? It was amazing to see how they try to use every single angle to drive a policy victory. And it wasn't It wasn't out for everybody to see. It wasn't a legislative process. It was that type of backroom coercion. And when you see that, you're like, wow, our government does that?
Yeah, it's like saying that if you donate to my opponent, you're excommunicated. Kind of the same thing. It's weird how that happens. It's strange.
So fascinating two stories. And in a second, I want to get to this conversation between Don Lemon and Elon Musk on free speech too, because this showcases a difference between, kind of free speech absolutism, constitutional free speech, and hate speech banning advocates.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating conversation. You're not going to want to miss it.
And the other part of there is that it also shows Don Lemon, not much of a journalist. Not much of a journalist at all. It is what he came to the table with in that discussion was crap.
Yeah.
And Elon appropriately punched him in the gooch.
All right. Jeff and Bill Show.
News Talk 710, KNUS.
At this hour in Berlin, I'm Trent Murray, and here are the top stories we're following. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says the US's commitment to defending the Philippines against armed attacks in the South China Sea is, quote, ironclad. Blinken is in Manila as part of a tour to reinforce support for its allies as China is increasingly asserting itself in the region. Patrick Falk has the story.
Well, in a joint press briefing with his Philippine counterpart Enrique Manolo, Antony Blinken said that the waterways of the South China Sea are critical not only to the Philippines, its economy and security, but also to the region, the US and the world. And these will have been very reassuring words for the Philippines at a time of heightened tensions between Manila and Beijing over their territorial disputes in the South China Sea, particularly as there are question marks over just how far Washington will go to defend its treaty ally in the event of any sort of armed attack, and as Beijing becomes increasingly aggressive in its actions.
New York City Mayor Eric Adams has been accused of sexual assault as part of a new lawsuit filed Monday. The suit alleges Adams assaulted a female police colleague in 1993, demanding a sexual favour in exchange for his help advancing her career in the New York Transit Police. And that's what you need to know at this hour. I'm Trent Murray in Berlin on Salem News Channel.
Talking free speech and the internet. 2 U.S. Supreme Court cases yesterday that deal with the government, free speech, and the internet. You're going to want to watch these. There were oral arguments, so no decisions yesterday, but the media thinks that the U.S. Supreme Court was split on it. One having to do with a series of attorney generals representing Republican states suing the Biden administration for what they did on COVID, and kind of pressuring the social media companies to take down what they deemed was COVID misinformation. Some of that wasn't, but the Biden administration deemed it was putting pressure on the social media companies. But the U.S. Supreme Court, this is what the Wall Street Journal thinks, didn't necessarily agree with the AGs, thinking that while the government put pressure on the social media companies, it didn't bring out the hammer the way that the New York state did against the NRA following the Sandy Hook shooting and going after any type of company that was affiliated with the NRA. So obviously the NRA was not responsible for the shooting. That was a lone gunman. But because the NRA advocates for the Second Amendment, the state of New York wanted to go after any company affiliated with the NRA to put pressure on them, mostly insurance companies, and threaten them with regulations, threaten them with investigations. And when you do that, when you bring the hammer out based upon free speech issues, then the Supreme Court tends to side on the free speech side. But that wasn't the only thing. There was a conversation between Don Lemon and Elon Musk on free speech. This was fascinating. Listen to the nuances here with regards to hate speech and punishing speech that's illegal. Those are the two issues. Listen to this.
We delete things if they are illegal. But these have been up there for a while. Are they illegal? They're not illegal, but they're hateful, and they can lead to violence. As I just read to you, the shooters, in all of these mass shootings, attributed social media to radicalizing.
So Don, you love censorship, is what you're saying?
No, I don't love censorship.
Then why are you asking?
I believe in moderation, but I don't believe in
censorship. Moderation is a propaganda word for censorship.
But don't you think free speech is one thing, right? Or not,
Look, if something's illegal, we're going to take it down. If it's not illegal, then we're putting our thumb on the scale and we're being censors.
You're putting your thumb on the scale for moderating hate speech. I mean, you don't put out child pornography. That's not.
It's illegal.
Some people would say that's considered censorship. I'm just saying you.
No, I literally, Don, I literally said, if something is legal, okay, we will obviously remove it.
Okay.
But if it is not legal, the laws in this country are put forward by the citizens. We're a democracy. If those laws are put in place by the people, we adhere to those laws.
So you have Don Lemon showing Elon Musk posts from X, and they're anti-Semitic posts. They're disgusting posts. And Don Lemon is asking Elon Musk why these weren't removed from X. Why are they up there on the platform right now? Elon Musk's response is, if it's not illegal, we won't take it down. Now, we won't promote it. That's a different issue. So we empower our algorithm, and they get into this in a larger conversation we don't have time to play for. But we're not going to use our algorithm to promote that. But we're not going to take it down unless it's illegal. So if you are anti-Semitic, hateful person, and you're posting stuff on your page, just the people that follow you might see it. It might be one or two people, but we're not going to use the algorithm to promote it. So there's no duty or responsibility on X to promote things that are hateful. But Elon Musk is not going to get into the business of moderation, and he even uses that term there, that moderation is just another term for censorship. What do you think of that conversation, Bill?
Don Lemon's not a journalist and got pantsed, and he should have. Yeah. That was an awful conversation, and he didn't think through his argument. He didn't think through his premise very far, because Musk is correct about the child pornography being illegal and the anti-Semitic information not being illegal. The conversation should have been about the role of moderation in social media. And I was surprised it didn't go that way, because what I hear from Elon, while he claims to be a free speech absolutist, his behavior says otherwise. Other journalists he's interacted with, most famously Matt Taibbi, who's on the Twitter files, says Elon Musk has fallen far short of his promise to be a free speech absolutist. And I think we see that we know that Elon Musk does manipulate the algorithm. We know the algorithm inside of Twitter is bent in part towards him, where his posts are more promoted, and not just because of his audience, but the algorithm shows that. So he's okay manipulating the algorithm, and he's also okay with giving voice to stuff that may or may not be correct. He had done that in the recent past. The issue in this conversation should be about the role of moderation. And this shows me that Elon Musk is eventually, again, going to drive Twitter into the ground.
Think so?
Oh, yeah, because
Why is that?
The end user wants and desires moderation. The end user does not want unfettered fire hose of anything anybody can present on a social media platform. That's been proven.
I don't see that on X, though.
No,
I see the people that I follow and engage with more frequently tending to pop up on my feed most frequently.
Yeah, that's true. But I'm saying that a part of that algorithm is moderation. That's how Elon Musk achieves it. So the idea that he says that moderation is just another word for propaganda, or it is a propaganda word for canceling free speech, he's wrong. He uses moderation. The idea that you cultivate based on the algorithm and what you see based on that's moderation.
Yeah.
So the end user wants and desires moderation. That's where the conversation should have been. What does that moderation look like? And is the end goal for the user to be somewhere where anything that anybody says is acceptable, or are there going to be parameters? And it's the idea of the public square. And I can get into it, right? We really should go to a break, but we can go into the idea that if we had the public square, like, say downtown Civic Center Park, or even do City Park downtown, near the museum, if we would have that function like the pseudo Elon Musk public square, nobody would go there. Nobody would walk through that park ever again because of what would be said inside of that location. It would be self-censoring. And that's the problem. The end user wants moderation. And heck, we can go back to the, what was it? Oh, crap. Early 90s, 2000s. CompuServe Prodigy examples on the earliest examples of social media, and what happened with how the two of them approached moderation differently, and what happened legally.
I don't know anything about that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it. I want to hear more about that. What did you think of the conversation between Elon Musk and Don Lemon yesterday, and the role of hate speech and free speech and moderation as it relates to social media? We'd love to hear from you. 303-696-1971. 303-696-1971, or text us on the 710 KNUS app. Imagine effortlessly gliding open your cabinets and drawers to reveal neatly arranged shelves that showcase your belongings. With roll-em-out shelves, you'll easily access your pots, pans, and other essentials, eliminating chaos and increasing speed and functionality in your home. Roll-em-out shelves understands that every home storage needs are unique. Whether you're dealing with tight corners or expansive cabinets, your shelves will be custom built to maximize every inch of available space. Joyce and Brent Tolliver, the mom and son dynamic duo, leave satisfied customers wherever they go, and their all 5-star reviews confirm this. Here's what some overjoyed customers have said. The quality of the products are excellent. The quality of the labor installation is outstanding. The customer service is unsurpassed. I absolutely recommend roll-em-out shelves. They are very good listeners, and they have great suggestions for cabinetry solutions. This is a top-notch company. Excellent product, excellent service and installation. We had shelves installed in the laundry room and kitchen. Makes a world of difference in accessing items. I highly recommend them. Begin the affordable transformation in your home for less than $1,000 when Roll 'em Out Shelves efficiently organizes your space with sturdy Baltic birch shelves built right here in Colorado and guaranteed for life. Call for your free in-home estimate today, 303-475-9601 or rollemoutshelves.com. Tell them Jeff sent you, 303-475-9601 or rollemoutshelves.com. We'll get your calls and texts. You're listening to The Jeff and Bill Show.
News Talk 710, KNUS.
At this
All right, coming up in the 9 o'clock hour, Keith Humphreys, who's a professor of psychiatry and behavioral sciences at Standford University and the author of Addiction, a very short introduction, is going to be joining us. He wrote an article in The Atlantic titled "Why Oregon's Drug Decriminalization Failed. The sponsors of the law fundamentally misunderstood the nature of addiction." You remember this was a big move a few years ago in Oregon, where we're going to get rid of the stigma of drug use and we're going to get people into help. And it was an utter public policy disaster. We're going to dive into that issue at the top of the 9 o'clock hour. Going back to free speech, we were just talking about Elon Musk and Don Lemon on free speech. Look, the social media companies, places like YouTube, have a natural desire to keep people on the platform as much as possible. So they're going to show you what you want. The challenge we have on moderation, content moderation, that type of stuff, is when the platform steps in and says, we disagree with this, and so we're going to make sure that in the case of like COVID-19 and those types of things, that people aren't able to access that information, period. Right. And so there's different levels of this, right? So even Elon Musk says, if you're out there posting anti-Semitic material, we're not going to take it off the platform, but we're just not going to promote it through the algorithm.
Yeah, Elon might promote it, but not the algorithm.
I don't think Elon Musk is an anti-Semitic.
No, I didn't think he might boost the post, though. I mean, he boosted a post about Haiti cannibalism that wasn't true. So again, what he's going to choose to amplify, I'm not calling him an anti-Semite. I'm just saying what he chooses to amplify is different.
So, where's the government line fall on that? This is all going to be decided by the U.S. Supreme Court in July. So it'll be interesting, or June or July. It'll be interesting to see what those cases come out with. 2 cases yesterday. We're following it all, and we're going to get to Keith Humphreys on Oregon and drug decriminalization. You're listening to the Jeff and Bill Show.
News Talk 710 KNUS.
9 a.m. in the Mile High City. Good morning, Denver. You've tuned into the Jeff and Bill Show on 710 KNUS. I'm your co-host, Jeff Hunt, along with Bill Thorpe. Bill did not confess his drug use before the DEA agent like I did.
No, I'm not. I'm much more intelligent than you. I'm not going to rat myself out. There's still a statute of limitations.
I can't believe I've made it this far without them breaking down the door.
Yeah, nice of them.
To come get me. Hey, we're bringing you the freshest insights, hottest takes to kickstart your day. It's a beautiful first day of spring in Denver, gearing up for a whole nother hour of engaging discussion, critical analysis, and your calls, because this is where Denver's voice is heard loud and clear. So let's grab your coffee, Denver, dive into the issues that matter most to you right here, right now. In just a few minutes, we're going to host Keith Humphreys. He's a professor with Standford University. He dived into the data and provides the clear analysis on why Oregon's drug decriminalization failed. Do you remember this effort by groups supported by George Soros, the Drug Policy Alliance, that we really need to remove the stigma of drugs? We need to back away from putting people in prison just simply for drug use and get out there and really help them with care and resources and all that stuff. And so Oregon a few years ago decided, well, we're not going to really penalize anybody for using any drugs, including the hardcore stuff. We're instead, we're going to give them recommendations for counseling and getting off, guiding them to get off their drugs and stuff like that. Almost nobody took advantage of it. It's become a total failure. It's called Measure 110. And now they're seeking to roll that back. So we're going to dive into all those details because if this was 2 or 3 years later, Colorado would have gone this way. And if we can keep this, particularly these drug injection sites, from becoming commonplace in the state of Colorado and the city of Denver, I think it could be a very good thing. So you're not going to want to miss Keith Humphreys, Standford University, in just a second. Let's check in on the news with Blake Olson. Good morning, Blake.
Morning, Jeff. Looking forward to it. Morning, Bill. 40 and clear in Denver, expecting sunny skies and highs in the low 60s today. The 710 5-day forecast is coming up. Our top story, your Second Amendment rights continue to be attacked in Colorado. Dudley Brown and the Rocky Mountain gun owners holding a rally this morning on the state capitol steps as another bill is being pushed to take away almost every gun.
Gun owners in this state are under assault. That is not an exaggeration. This state is circling the drain on Second Amendment issues. And it's largely because the great number of firearms owners in this state are just asleep. They just said, it'll never affect me.
The Supreme Court is preventing Texas police from arresting people who they believe are in the country illegally. The law will remain blocked pending further approval. Fentanyl continues to stream through the southern border, and thankfully, no fourth graders on a chartered bus from Pueblo found fentanyl pills that were more than likely left from a previous charter group. David Olesky from the DEA was on the show this morning with the guys, and he says, unfortunately, it is everywhere.
As a parent, you're probably listening to it and think, oh my gosh, I have to worry about my fourth grader now with this situation. This story did not surprise me, as I said, from the standpoint of 50 or 60 fentanyl pills left on a bus. It could be the same thing if you're like, hey, your local fast food place found a couple of fentanyl pills sitting in at a table in the restaurant. It is so prevalent out there, and it's not just the supply of fentanyl, it's also the price.
So continue to talk to your kiddos. 17-year-old suspect accused of causing a deadly crash in Aurora now faces a murder charge. Remember 2 days ago, he carjacked someone, then he took off with the stolen car and then hit a victim who died from the injuries of the crash. The 17-year-old being held on suspicion of second-degree murder. The first Buc-ee's location in Colorado now officially open in Johnstown, 40 miles north of Denver. Johnstown Mayor Troy Mellon says he expects the store to bring millions of dollars in revenue to the area.
It's a huge employment opportunity for Johnstown.
All right, gas and food and anything
I gotta
else
go
you're
up there.
looking
I've
for.
never been to a Buc-ee's. Have you been,
Yeah.
Blake?
Oh yeah, they're all over Texas. So my best friend lives in San Antonio, and I was introduced to Buc-ee's I think a couple decades ago, but it's a great place. Plenty of good stuff in there and good food too. It's like the Walmart of gas stations, honestly. So check it out if you come up north. I know.
I think
Billy
there's
will
a
be
whole
stopping by.
Instagram about the people of Walmart. I'm not sure that was the best way to sell a Buc-ee's.
Hey, watch yourself. Hey, 5 states will hold presidential primaries today, although both President Biden and former President Trump have already passed their respective parties' delegate threshold. Arizona, Florida, Illinois, Kansas, and Ohio will all hold elections. Almost 1,000 Americans in Haiti are asking the State Department for help where gang violence has plunged the nation into chaos. State Department says that people have been filling out crisis intake forms online as the U.S. tries
the wrong
to get
way
people.
to do it.
Yes.
You just got to climb onto the airplane. We learned this in Afghanistan. This is how the Biden administration works. If you want to get out of a country they've ruined, you climb onto the landing gear of an airplane.
Absolutely. Or go straight to Mexico or get on a floaty.
Right.
I mean,
that's the best way into this country.
That's what they're experiencing right now in Florida. Congress is working to avoid a partial government shutdown, but at the same time, don't we all want them just to shut down right now, please? 35 in Broomfield, 37 in Highlands Ranch, 40 in Denver, and it's a big day. March Madness tipping off tonight at 7 o'clock, 7:10 officially. CSU takes on Virginia in the play-in game. The winner will take on Texas. CU meets Boise State tomorrow in Dayton as well. The winner faces the Florida Gators on Friday in Indy. And great work by the Broncos, Dave Bratton, UNC Pro Day, working out Taiwan Harris, Tyzel Lewis, and Cam Murray. These are really good young men. Rooting for all these guys. They have a chance. Jeff and Bill continuing the power hour, the 9 o'clock hour coming up. Blake Olson, News Talk 710 KNUS.
The 7:10 5-day forecast, sunny to partly sunny and mild, low 60s today, 30s tonight, 60s Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So through Friday, very nice weather, very spring-like. Welcome to spring. It happens at 9:06 p.m. tonight. We're going to be fair, dry, and mild through Friday. Increasingly cloudy and cooler, though, for the weekend. Late Saturday night, Sunday into Monday. Chances of showers developing and temperatures trending colder. Meteorologist Dante, 710 KNUS.
Joining us online is Keith Humphreys. He's a professor of psychiatry and behavioral sciences at Standford University and is the author of Addiction, a very short introduction. He's also a member of the Stanford Network on Addiction Policy. He and Rob Bovet wrote an article yesterday in The Atlantic, Why Oregon's Drug Decriminalization Failed. The sponsors of the law fundamentally misunderstood the nature of addiction. Dr. Humphreys, thanks so much for joining the Jeff and Bill Show.
Very happy to be here.
So dive into the history of this law, Measure 110. How did it get passed? And then what were the consequences of it? And why are they trying to roll it back now?
Well, the law was passed due to a very well-funded ballot initiative funded mainly by an organization called Drug Policy Alliance, which is based in New York. And their idea was if you legalize the use of drugs like fentanyl and meth and let people use them when and where they wanted, and you removed all the stigma and disapproval, then a lot of good things would happen. People would start coming in for health services, neighborhoods would be safer, crime would go down, homelessness would go down. And it seemed, credible, I guess, to the voters, since they voted it in by a pretty healthy margin. But none of those things actually happened. And since the law came into effect in 2001, it's been a real tough time in Oregon with rising crime, sort of declining neighborhood, appearance and amenity, and also really sharp increases in drug overdoses. And that shifted the political dynamic, and that led the legislature to overwhelmingly switch directions, and in both the House and the Senate, vote to overturn the measure, and the governor has pledged to sign it. So it's going to be gotten rid of probably in the next week.
And so in overturning it, are they going back to rounding people up for having a joint in their pocket and throwing them into jail for 20 years? What does that look like for actually repealing it?
So one of the things that I think the people who wrote the initiative really misunderstood. They said this is going to overturn, the big evil war on drugs. But Oregon never fought a war on drugs. Oregon was the first state in the country to decriminalize marijuana, like 50 years ago. So you can't get thrown in jail for having a joint in your pocket in Oregon. That hasn't been true for a very long time. And they also write their laws so it's impossible to go to a prison just for drug use. It's always been, it's a mixture of sort of left-wing and libertarian sentiments in Oregon. So what they'll go to is a system where they're going to do everything they can when they get people, say, shooting up fentanyl in the park or robbing a house to get money for drugs. They're going to have drug courts and other kinds of deflection things to try to keep people out of the criminal justice system. There'll still be accountability, but, make them go to treatment, monitor them closely, and do all they can not to incarcerate them. The other big thing is they're spending about $260 million new dollars on treatment and other health services, which should help. That's been Oregon's enduring problem, is that they really haven't had much of a treatment system ever.
We're talking with Keith Humphreys, a professor of psychiatry and behavioral sciences at Standford University. He has a new article out in The Atlantic, Why Oregon's Drug Decriminalization Failed. Look, the end goal, I think, for all of us involved in public policy, all of us with family members that have drug addiction issues, is not to put people in prison, not to make life harder, but for people to be freed up from the shackles of addiction. You've written a book about this. What do we need to do to get there? To be at a culture where people aren't going to be using drugs so much, aren't so addicted, aren't struggling with all the secondary issues that come from drug addiction, homelessness, loss of job, breakdown of families, all those issues.
I like the way you said that, and you're absolutely right. We definitely do not want to fill up our prisons with people who are addicted, not least because those people are often our friends, our family, our loved ones that we're trying to help. And at the same time, it is true that when people are addicted, they do things that threaten public safety, whether it's, driving intoxicated or violence or theft. And so there's some role for criminal justice, but we want health in the lead. And that means things like, treatment. That means things like the overdose rescue medication, like naloxone, which I expect most people have heard of. And so you lead with that health. You treat it as an illness as much as you can, but you have the law there, to say, look, you can't steal stuff, or if you're going to keep, dealing drugs in the park to feed your addiction, there's got to be consequences for that. And those two things have to work together. The other thing that's really important is we want to invest in prevention. It is infinitely easier to have someone not start using drugs like fentanyl and meth than try to help them and minimize the damage that they do once they're already addicted. And we're not very good at investing in prevention. We kind of lurch from crisis to crisis rather than thinking in the long term, where do we want to be in 10 years? And if that's what we were thinking, we'd be investing much more in kids than we do right now.
Our cultures kind of bounce back and forth. I grew up during the DARE years, right? We had DARE training in middle school, just say no, war on drugs. And then it felt like our culture did a 180 and went the complete opposite direction of not just decriminalizing marijuana, but commercializing the drug. Now it's psychedelic mushrooms. And then you have safe injection sites and Oregon's effort to decriminalize pretty much the use of any hard drug. Where does our culture go? Do you think we kind of swing back towards the being tougher on drugs at this point, as we've seen it just ruin our communities?
Absolutely. My generational experience is the same as yours. And one of the things we talk about in the Atlantic piece is that we need to stop thinking about these things as on-off switches. Like you can have a carceral, racist war on drugs, or you just have to let everyone use every drug whenever and wherever they want, as if those were our only choices. And the truth is, it's not a switch, it's a dial. and we can turn these things up and down. You think like there's a certain amount of work for police to do and courts to do. There's a certain amount of health to do, and you got to find that optimal balance. And it's very hard when we get into these polarized discussions of, you have two choices. You have this extreme or that extreme. And that happens in part because often it's activists who dominate the debate. And I would say, the 75, 80% of people who are fundamentally reasonable, practical, would like to see a decent pragmatic solution need to speak up more and not let the conversation be dominated by the people on the fringes.
My co-host is Bill Thorpe. Bill, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
Colorado and Oregon have very similar political leanings.
Yep.
Why do you think Colorado never went all the way on full drug decriminalization?
That's an interesting question, because I do think they tried a little bit with reducing criminal penalties for things like we saw the fentanyl problem and things, as far as expanding the amount you can have before being held. I think, I am offering some of the Democrats in this state a little bit of grace that they may not be entitled to. But my feeling is, when you have the conversation and say, we just need to decriminalize all of it, it sounds really stupid. I mean, it just the functionality of what that means, that all of this is going to be decriminalized. And then how do we ever assume that that is going to lead to less of it? It just, you can take that argument into any other criminal section of our law, and if you decriminalize it, you can talk about how we're holding people responsible, but you're not going to get less of it. And the part that I find really interesting, Professor Humphreys, a conversation there, is the fact that Oregon did this and then did not lean into funding treatment infrastructure. That is ridiculous. That is, to me, that's almost like building a building but not making it up to fire code, or not following electrical codes. The idea is, these are things that can happen. You're going to have things go wrong. So why would you not have this preventative system in place, especially when that was the stupid goal? Their whole goal was, we decriminalize it so we can get them the help they need, and then they don't invest in the help. It's as if they were asking to fail. It's as if it was designed by a bunch of fifth graders that couldn't see further than one week down the road to say, yay, we did criminalize the drugs. Now nobody's going to be a criminal anymore. Now what do we do? They didn't think it any further than that.
Yeah, well, there's different camps that support this stuff. For some people, the decriminalization is it. It's the only thing. That's their view. If there's treatment, if there isn't treatment, they don't care about that so much. Other people, like you and me, and I think probably the average person, really does care about treatment and wants to see those investments made, irrespective of whether drugs are legal or illegal. We need treatment for alcohol. That's legal. But we see people who are addicted to alcohol, and we want to have treatment available for them. And that is a national problem, and when we aren't willing to make that investment, we end up paying for it. We all pay for it, because we pay for it in crime, we pay for it in people going to prison, we pay for it in violence. It's really both more humane, but also just more pragmatic and cost effective to make sure every person who's addicted, who wants help, no matter what they're addicted to, legal or illegal, is able to get it.
Hey, we have a system here, a program that's an advertiser on the station, but also Jeff and I are big supporters, Step Denver, and they get homeless men off the street. Number one step is addiction recovery. They then get them into training and housing and job training and a whole bunch of other stuff. But the first step is recovery, because they have to break the cycle that got these men on the streets in the first place. We do have instances of economic issues and other things that do place people on the streets. But in the conversation here, I think we can all agree, and I think it's been proven, that the number one motivator to keep someone on the streets is addiction, whatever that addiction is.
But here's my question to you, Bill, and to Dr. Humphreys. Step Denver, when they come on the show and they're successful, right? They're actually getting guys out of homelessness. They will always say that the person has to want it.
Yes.
They've got to be at the bottom. So I understand those folks. And I'm so glad we have organizations like Step Denver to come alongside. What do you do with people that don't want to end their addiction?
Well, according to the Democrats in Colorado, set up safe injection sites
and
then give them hugs and cookies, which is not going to help the problem.
You wrote a book on this, author a very short introduction. What do you do with people and public policy, maybe even in our own personal lives, that don't want to give up their addiction?
Yeah, well, that's how addiction is different than conditions like depression or chronic pain. You never, if you had a treatment that got rid of chronic pain, every single chronic pain patient in the country would beat a path to your door because chronic pain is a misery all day long. Same with depression. But with addiction, of course, you're taking a drug and it feels good in the short term, even as your life is falling apart around you. And people are ambivalent about giving that up. And as a result, more than 9 out of 10 people you see coming into addiction treatment are there under some form of pressure rather than just they spontaneously concluded they want care. That is an unusual person. Far more common where someone comes in and says, look, my wife said I either need to stop doing this or she's moving out with the kids. My boss said if I show up high at work one more time, I'm fired. My doctor said, if you keep doing this, you are going to be dead in 6 months. Or their lawyer or a cop said, this is your third bust for intoxicated driving. You better go to treatment so that the judge doesn't send you to prison. That is the norm. And we need to be realistic about that, which the way the people in Oregon were not. They assumed if you remove all pressure to seek any kind of help, a flood of people will come in. That's the opposite of what happens. When you remove all pressure, people keep using drugs because they're addictive, and using drugs feels good in the short term. That's why people use them.
Oh, you're exactly right. Of course, you know that. But the issue that we were just talking about here, Step Denver, is part of the way they get men through that door is by going to the jails. And they go to guys that have been picked up for crimes that are related to their addiction. And they offer them a secondary path and say, here, you can come out and you can do your time here, but here are the rules. And it's interesting when you talk to Step Denver, there's a portion of men that come, there are some that step out of jail and go, I ain't doing this. I'm going to go back and serve my time so that I can feed my addiction when I get out. So yeah, that's part of how Step Denver. Now they do have people that walk through the front door, but
that's
you're
very smart.
Yeah.
That's very smart. I think that's understanding the nature of the condition. So then in that case, you've got the leverage where you can actually make a more attractive offer than they have in front of them.
Exactly.
And so you can stay in jail. You don't want to do that, but guess what? This is hard work, but you won't be in jail.
Yeah, we have people at this station that went to Vancouver to look at the safe drug injection sites because the Democrats here in Colorado have been floating the idea of, harm reduction centers, because we have to be totally focused on reducing the harm for the user, not for society, which, okay, not even go down that road. But they talked to the people that were in Vancouver, and it was weird. They had the addiction treatment centers upstairs above the safe drug injection sites. No one was walking upstairs. No one was going upstairs after using their drugs and getting off the drugs. No one came out of their high and said, man, I can't do this anymore. I need to go upstairs. They all walked out that front door and found a way to get the drugs to then come back to the safe drug injection site. It didn't break the cycle at all, but they all stood around and assumed they were doing good because they had that addiction treatment there, regardless of it not being used.
I think you're touching on probably what a big dividing line is in this country, how people feel about harm reduction. I think there's a lot of broad support for it. Like naloxone is everywhere.
Yeah.
People accept that. But there's a split between people say, and the reason we're doing this is because in the long term, we aspire to recovery. And if harm reduction keeps them alive until they're ready to recover, then I support it. That's actually most people. And there's a smaller group of people say, no, recovery treatment, that's kind of, paternalistic and moralistic. We're here to support their autonomous choice to continue to use drugs. And if they never go to treatment, we're not, that's not important. That's a split. And I think that people in Oregon were more on the side of the latter side, but I think most of the voters were on the side of, hey, we thought if we did this, there would be more people in recovery, not fewer. And I think that's what people want. And that's my sense of Colorado, I've testified in your legislature. I think that split exists there as well. Those two philosophies of why are we doing this and what is the purpose of all this?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right.
Keith Humphreys is a professor of psychiatry and behavioral sciences at Standford University, the author of Addiction, a very short introduction. He's also a member of the Standford Network on Addiction Policy. I've come across your work in the past, Dr. Humphreys, on marijuana. That's a big drug in our culture right now. Can you explain what some of your research has found with regards to that drug?
Colorado is really the heart of this, the change in cannabis or marijuana, as it's called. So there's the drug, 30, 40, 50 years ago, marijuana was a low strength drug, 3, 4, 5% THC. The average person used it maybe once a week who used it. Now it's the average legal marijuana product's about 20% THC, and we've had this massive rise in people who use it all day, almost every day. So that's just it's a different experience today to be a heavy cannabis user than it was 30, 40 years ago. And cannabis, you're not going to die of an overdose, or if that ever happens, it's a 1 in 100 million kind of thing. That's not your worry. But certainly people have problems, and they're coming in, to places like the Stanford Sky Department with things like loss of motivation, loss of ability to concentrate, sometimes sleep disturbance, sometimes cyclical vomiting, which is a really unpleasant condition to have. And it's sort of like if we have performance enhancing drugs, it's kind of like a performance degrading drug, and it may be the difference between someone like who would graduate high school and then they flunk out of high school instead, and that's a different life to have. And that's why we need to be concerned about marijuana, and I'm not talking about like the 1980s stereotypical screaming about pot kind of way, but just like we would any other public health problem, like we need to think about alcohol, the impact of that. We need to start thinking about cannabis as a drug that does some harm, needs to be well regulated, and we can't just do everything that the industry wants, because industries have their own interests. The more they sell, the more money they make. But as citizens, as parents particularly, we have other interests, which is we want healthy and effective people around us.
Keith Humphreys, a professor of psychiatry and behavioral sciences at Standford University. He wrote an article, Why Oregon's Drug Decriminalization Failed. It's in The Atlantic if you want to go read it there. If you want to follow Dr. Humphreys, his Twitter handle or X handle is Keith N. Humphreys. So go to twitter.com/Keith N. Humphreys. Follow him there for insightful thinking on drug public policy. Dr. Humphreys, I really appreciate you being on the Jeff and Bill Show.
Really enjoyed it. Great to talk to you guys.
Hey, guys, eliminate the stress and uncertainty of selling your home while still getting top dollar with Gay Ribble and the Empower Home Team with Keller Williams Sell. Their Sell with Certainty program guarantees your home will sell without even having to list it, and at the same time, getting you top dollar. Getting an offer above your home's asking price is great, but you're leaving money on the table by not working with Gay Ribble and the Empower Home Team. Gay and her experts get their clients, listen to this, an average of $30,000 more. Could you use an extra $30,000? That's precisely why you need Gay Ribble and the Empower Home Team. Their exclusive database is filled with pre-screened buyers ready to make a purchase. Take the stress and hassle out of selling your home while getting the best price. Here's an incredible, unbeatable offer. Gay Ribble and the Empower Home Team will sell your house for 100% of the asking price, or Gay will pay you the difference. It's an offer you simply cannot refuse. Get 100% of your asking price guaranteed with Gay Ribble and the Empower Home Team. Reach out to my friends and realtors at Gay Ribble and the Empower Home Team today. Call 833-301-SOLD. That's 833-301-SOLD, or go to gayhasthebuyers.com. That's GAYE hasthebuyers.com. That was very insightful from Keith Humphreys as to what. Here's the thing that I appreciated about that is if we're going to treat marijuana like alcohol and tobacco, you've got to have an interest in protecting consumers. You can't just let the industry do whatever they want.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. And I liked his insight that just hoping they eventually are going to be looking for addiction treatment isn't going to help. Yeah. The important idea that pressure needs to be there. And I like the idea of how he talked about the Colorado approach to cannabis usage, and he got into your commercialization argument, which is wonderful, that as long as there is a profit motive, the industry is going to focus more on the idea of selling more. And oddly enough, when you say, well, now we're going to take taxes out of it, like we do in Colorado, and I don't know where the taxes are going anymore. We're supposed to be getting the taxes and paying.
Yeah, I can tell you about all those taxes.
Yeah, I have no idea where it's going.
Report on it.
Yeah, but the idea is then the companies are now motivated to sell more because they have to make up the profits that they're losing based on the taxes that are being taken out. So there's an additional motivation for them to sell more. And yeah, and I think, and how our culture is going has changed things a lot, because you and I, growing up in those DARE times, if you had someone, think about it, walking down the street and one person had a Budweiser logo on their T-shirt. The next person walking down the street had a marijuana leaf on their shirt, and the third person maybe a pile of cocaine or even a syringe for injecting for heroin or something else. You would view, when we were growing up, the first person, you're like, oh, Budweiser. The next person, the pot and the heroin, you'd be, eh. But now there's more of an exception. The acceptance of the marijuana leaf and what that means in the culture and how we've dealt with it.
I like the idea of the vision of the dials.
Yeah,
right.
I think the dial is very appropriate.
It's not either or. It's not the full war on drugs, just say no type of thing, and it's not the Oregon approach, which we talked about, which was
the Oregon's approach was
best of luck, my friend.
When he grew up, it was just say no. Oregon was just say yes. That's basically what they said. It's just our answer is yes, whatever you want.
And so the dials back and forth. What did you think of that? Do you think? Well, here's what I'd love to hear from the listeners of 710 KNUS. What do we do about this drug culture? We have a culture right now that for the last 10, 15 years has embraced drug use. You saw that in Oregon, where we're really not going to do anything about it. And if you show up for help, you show up for help, but have a good time. It was an utter disaster to the point where the voters of Oregon were demanding a change. So where do we go from here? You heard fentanyl at the 7 o'clock hour, fentanyl on fourth grade buses, Oregon rolling back their drug culture. What do we do? I'd love to hear from you. 303-696-1971 or text us on the 710 KNUS app. Let me tell you why you should call Mitch Floria and the Art of Granite to put together the perfect kitchen or bathroom remodel for you. Quality craftsmanship. Mitch is such an expert and craftsman that he can turn granite, quartz, marble, or other materials into a true work of art right in your home. Superior service. From single residential installations to large-scale projects, Mitch and his team's attention to detail is unmatched. They will listen to you and get you what you need. Great value. Mitch provides granite from his own warehouse in Denver West at wholesale prices with no markup, so you can get the most for your budget. Mention KNUS and receive a bathroom countertop free with the purchase of your fantastic new kitchen countertops, or get a kitchen or bathroom sink free with the purchase of any countertop package. Schedule a consultation with Mitch and visit his beautiful showroom in Denver West, or call Mitch at 303-386-5919. Or you can visit his website at theartofgranite.com to start dreaming about your new countertops. That's 303-386-5919 or theartofgranite.com. All right, we'll get to your calls and texts. You're listening to the Jeff and Bill Show.
News Talk 710 KNUS.
At this hour in Berlin, I'm Trent Murray, and here are the top stories we're following. An Ohio mother who left her 16-month-old daughter home alone for 10 days while she went on vacation has been sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole. 32-year-old Crystal Candelario pled guilty to all charges after she left her daughter in a playpen at home in Cleveland while she traveled to Detroit and Puerto Rico. 2 of the 6 former Mississippi police officers who pleaded guilty to abusing and torturing 2 black men last year are set to be sentenced today. Federal prosecutors and the victims have requested the maximum penalties for all 6 officers. Iris Bitzer has the story.
The incident in January of last year brought Mississippi's troubled history with race relations to the surface again after 6 white officers illegally entered one of the victims' homes and tortured the 2 black men for about 90 minutes. Afterwards, the officers, who prosecutors said called themselves the Goon Squad, planted and tampered with evidence in an attempt to cover up the crimes. The officer who shot one of the men in the mouth faces a maximum sentence of 30 years, while the other 5 officers could be sentenced to up to 20 years.
And that's what you need to know at this hour. I'm Trent Murray in Berlin on Salem News Channel.
Welcome to the Jeff and Bill Show. We just wrapped up a great conversation with Dr. Keith Humphreys of Standford University. He's got an article in The Atlantic on why Oregon's drug decriminalization effort failed. You want the details there and whether or not this is a seed change for the kind of the drug decriminalization movement across the country. Look, Colorado's not in a great place. I know we embrace marijuana. We embrace psychedelic mushrooms. We're not in a great place on this. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Give us a call, 303-696-1971, or text us on the 710 KNUS app. Lauren Boebert came out with her first ad, her first Trump-supporting ad. I want to get your thoughts on this, Bill. Here it is.
Lauren, you're going to do fantastically in your district. Lauren Boebert, thank you.
President Donald J. Trump has endorsed America First warrior Lauren Boebert for Congress. Trump says Congresswoman Boebert is a proven conservative who has led the fight to stop illegal immigration, defend the Second Amendment, and stand up to the radical Democrats who want to destroy our country. We need Lauren fighting for us in Washington. Stand with President Trump and vote Lauren Boebert for Congress.
I'm Lauren Boebert, and I approve this message.
Is that enough in CD4, Bill?
Maybe. I think it does help because of the Trump and because of that district. But I'm curious to see what the poll numbers look like. And obviously, she wouldn't have dropped that if she didn't think that the Donald Trump endorsements wouldn't resonate, especially coming to the primary. That's where I think it's most important. General, it may not be as important because there may be some persuadable people that are either unaffiliated or just, and we know that Trump is a great motivator, both to vote for him, but also to motivate people against him. Could there be some extra motivation of people that may or may not have even participated in the last several election cycles, all of a sudden showing up, and does it become more of a negative? The other one for me, though, is I don't know. The way those ads are written, I personally do not think that it's an effective message. I just think those particular brand of messaging it gets lost by the listener and or viewer because it sounds too cookie cutter. It sounds too much like a political ad. It sounds too much like a message that we can tune it out.
I'm Donald Trump, and I support Lauren Boebert.
Lauren, you're going to do fantastically in your district. Lauren Boebert.
In fact, one of the worst things in the world that any politician can do is to lead with themselves saying, I'm so-and-so and I endorse this message. That is awful messaging because the end consumer tunes you out immediately. You've given me permission to tune you out. It's just like in any sort of advertisement. If you start the advertisement with a question, that is the worst thing in the world to do because now you've given me permission to tune you out and not listen to you. Same thing.
So Donald Trump wins Colorado in the Republican primary 2-1. 63, Nikki Haley 1/3. It might be just enough with the power of that endorsement for Dave Williams and Lauren Boebert to win their primaries with that alone.
It could, but
2-1.
Oh, yeah. But the question you have, what happens to that other third? Where do they go?
Matter.
Well, it does, not in the primary, in the general.
Well,
that's
in the
question
general
I
election,
have.
but these are such safe districts that I'm not sure.
But again, the idea being that if you have 1/3 of the potential Republican voters not wanting that candidate, especially the idea of what we saw with some of the Haley voters in some of the exit polls, that there's no way they'd ever vote for Donald Trump. They'll never pull that switch. They may sit out the election. They may choose someone else. So that's that negative motivation. So I'm curious that 1/3 of voters there that didn't vote for Trump, how much is that a motivator? Because here's the idea. Let's say that motivates someone to not show up or not vote for the Republicans. That hurts Lauren, those down ballot tickets, especially if that voter decides to sit this one out. That's what I'm worried about. I understand. It's touchdown city inside of the primary. But the primary doesn't get you all the time to Congress in this particular electoral environment. And that's all I'm talking about is that Donald Trump is such a positive motivator, but also a negative motivator. So where does that 1/3 go?
I want to hear from folks. I'd love to hear from you. 303-696-1971. Is that endorsement enough for you to pull the lever for Lauren Boebert in the primary? Now, there's going to be somebody else that gets a special election because she's not going through that route. Is that endorsement Dave Williams, Lauren Boebert, Is that it? Is that good enough for you to go, those are my people, let's send them to Congress, let's elect Donald Trump in November, then have people that are ready and willing to work with him in Congress to get the agenda done? I don't want the fighting. I don't want the Republican infighting. I just want people that have his endorsement, get them across the line, get them into Congress, and let's go to work in November. 303-696-1971, 303-696-1971, or text us on the 710 KNUS app. Men, you've heard a lot about how treating low testosterone can improve your sleep, your workouts, your energy levels, and more. But I want to talk to you about your love drive, because low testosterone can have a significant impact on your desire for intimacy. And if you're in a relationship or wanting to be in a relationship, a low love drive can really be a problem. There's good news. Go to RockyMountainMen'sClinic.com and take the low T quiz on their website. It's a simple 10-question quiz with yes or no answers. It only takes 2 minutes. Then schedule a consult with Rocky Mountain Men's Clinic. A Colorado licensed medical provider will review your results with you and discuss your options. Cost of the appointment is only $99, which includes a medical consult, T and PSA test. If you sign up for testosterone treatment the day of your appointment, the visit is free. Rocky Mountain Men's Clinic has served the Front Range of Colorado for nearly a decade and successfully treated tens of thousands of men. I visited them. I met with the guys. You have guys from every walk of life coming in there, construction workers, guys in suits, athletes, everybody. Rocky Mountain Men's Clinic is a reputable place to visit. Call them today, 720-440-7900. 720-440-7900, or visit RockyMountainMen'sClinic.com. That's RockyMountainMen'sClinic.com. Let's do some of these text messages. I saw somebody had voted. I had voted for the herb originally, but I didn't think through the trash this attracted to the state. I wouldn't vote for it again. This is marijuana. With that said, the federal big brother needs to make this legal. Interesting. They kind of bounce around on all that.
That is interesting, because I think there is an argument that maybe it shouldn't be a Schedule I classification anymore, because I think that undercuts the drug message, because when it's being equated with all the others, and it's like we talked about as kids. I mean, there were a number of kids, you probably knew them as well, that went through the DARE program, and then the first time they were exposed to different types of drugs, there were different experiences. Some of them, they were like, oh, well, this doesn't nearly have the consequences or the bad stuff they told me about. So could the other ones also, could they be lying about those? I think that's part of what hurts classifying marijuana as a Schedule I. I think what it does is anyone that experiments with marijuana then thinks that's then on par with the rest of the Schedule Is. And I think
that's a fair point, because people think that it gets the schedule based upon how hard the drug is.
Exactly.
It gets the schedule based upon its relevancy to health and its ability to actually solve ailments for you.
But
it doesn't get that based upon actually how hard the drug is.
And I think that hurts it, though. I think that hurts, the impression of it, because it allows us to believe that the other drugs aren't as severe and don't have those consequences. So it allows you to experiment. And I think it's a mistake, but well.
All right, give us a call, 303-696-1971, or text us on the 710 KNUS app. I hope Lauren Boebert and David Williams lose.
Yeah, and say hello to Cortez, because Cortez, Colorado, called a minute ago. Nice. Really nice gentleman. It's like, I got to figure a better way to stream the show and how to get connected, because he can't listen to it all the time. So hello, Cortez. Yeah,
YouTube, follow us, read us on YouTube, or go to 710 KNUS. You can stream it right there. Bill, anybody who claims to be a Republican and won't vote for Trump is not a Republican. Or an American. Ooh.
Yeah, because
throwing down on that one.
Yeah, because that's the one thing that is the hallmark of the Republicans. Do what we say and stay in the group, or screw you, because of individual freedoms and liberties. I find
those people aren't voting Republican seem to be endorsing communist ideas.
Again, we can debate that as far as an issue. I just and I can agree on some of them, but the issue being that the Party of Freedom and Liberty says, no, if you don't agree with what I say, get out. That's curious. And I hear that all the time. I don't like the purity test on either side. But we just got purity tested again. And the idea is, one of the fun part about it is, you're not American. That's a really interesting line, that if you don't agree with how I'm voting, you're no longer an American. Yeah, there are some other countries that do that. Not here. If that's the system you want, there are other systems that are available for you. If that's your motivation, you can join those. If you want to try to change America to that, you can do that as well, because that's the beautiful thing about America. I'm never an America love it or leave it person. The thing that we've been given here is the ability to change it. You want to make that argument that everybody needs to vote Republican or they're no longer Americans? Okay, make the argument. See how well that works out.
You saw in Russia this week that Vladimir Putin won by a big margin.
Of course he did.
And it's almost as bad as when, opponents, certain political leaders in this state try to keep their opponents off the ballot too, right? All right. We'll get into your calls and texts. You're listening to the Jeff and Bill Show.
News Talk 710 KNUS.
Listen to this, Bill.
Yes.
Red Rock sells more White Claw than anywhere in the U.S.
I'm ashamed. I'm
All
so
right.
ashamed of us.
So about 2 or 3 miles from Red Rocks, you have what? Golden?
Yeah, brewery.
The Coors
Yep,
Brewery.
yeah.
I bet there's an executive from Coors this morning walking in, throwing that on a coffee table or the meeting table, saying, "What is going on?
Yeah.
How is Red Rock selling so much White Claw? They need to be selling our stuff."
Oh, yeah. I'm curious about that. Why? Because you can get venue
Oh,
sponsors.
because it's the biggest. It drives the most visitors to Colorado than anywhere else.
Oh,
Red
yeah,
Rocks.
it's magical. Yeah, I've been at numerous shows where everybody around me is from a different state.
Yeah.
Tons of them have traveled, people coming from New York into Florida because it is somewhat of a pilgrimage if the band that you're following comes here.
Yeah, right.
It's wonderful. I'm just wondering who's responsible for their venue contract, because that's the issue. Is normally venues have contracts as far as what they sell, and how could Molson Coors let anybody else have control of that contract? I would overpay for it just because. I mean, again,
because
that's
it's your backyard.
Yeah, it's just there.
And you should have Coors on the sides. When we hosted the Romney thing there, we put the big R on the sides of the rock.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, and they can project stuff onto the rocks. You
Yeah,
could easily
right.
take a message there and do that during some of the opening acts and
There you
things
go.
like that. I mean, come on,
It's got to
people.
change. Come on,
Yeah.
Coors. Let's go to Bob in Denver. You're on the Jeff and Bill Show, News Talk 710 KNUS. Good morning, Bob.
Hello. I wanted to suggest that the answer to your question is simple. And I'm a respecter of history. And I think if we were willing to learn from history and recent history, that an endorsement by Trump puts general election opportunities at risk.
You think
And
even
I think
in
we
like
are
CD4 with R+9?
Say again?
You think even in these deep red conservative congressional districts?
Yes, I think it puts it at risk. It's not as much at risk. However, I have been representative to the General Assembly down in Colorado Springs, the last one that we held, and so forth. I don't want to be represented by people like Lauren Boebert and her ilk. I'm a conservative Republican. I voted Republican all my life.
Bob, I appreciate the call. We got to continue that conversation tomorrow.
Call us
We
back
will.
tomorrow. Please, Bob, call us back tomorrow and we'll talk to you
there's
more
a
about
lot more there I'd like to dive into. Hey, Charlie Kirk is up next, followed by Dennis Prager, Sebastian Gorka, Officer Tatum, Jay Sekulow, and Mark Levin. You've been listening to the Jeff and Bill Show.
News Talk 710 KNUS.